I'm gonna open up I got my app open here. I got my app. Let me hit it. What's going on, everybody?
So much, so much. Can we start with say her name?
Yeah.
Say her name. Breonna Taylor. I don't know if this is justice, but one of the police officers who shot 10 bullets into her home, a 12-member jury, which is why we have to show up when our number is called. We got to show up for our people in Louisville. They convicted the officer last night or night before. They were in tears, some of the jurors, as they read the verdict, guilty. Breonna Taylor's mom celebrated, but I'm sure it was more relief because
of course,
for 4 years, your baby, I don't even know if this is justice because she's not here.
No, it's not justice because she's not here. Right. Yeah. Although she no doubt put her thumb on the scale from the other side, but that's not the point. She shouldn't be over there yet.
Correct. But I was thinking today how important it is for just regular people. We focus a lot on celebrities as if there's more importance. Even these candidates, whether you're a Trump supporter or a Kamala Harris supporter, putting human beings on pedestals is going to be a mistake. And you're always going to be disappointed because they're just people. They're just people. And in the case of politicians, they're servants. So they're really there to work for you. The relationship that we have with these folk who are talented or who have position or power is wrong because they got the same vote that you have. Just like I told that 18-year-old young man whose mom was very disappointed in I was like, you got the same exact vote. But that means you should have a responsibility to make sure that you're not just throwing it away or doing something without any. Like I did a lot of search and thought and reading to cast that exact same vote that you cast.
Exactly.
Something's low, so we have to.
And for the folks who aren't in the Sirius XM family, 126 family, you mind telling folk because they may not know.
Well, I posted the video.
Did you? Okay, you did. Oh, that's right, you did. That's right. It's on YouTube. So y'all go and look on Karen's channel for that conversation because you couldn't hide it. So
I was excited. We have a few days left till Election Day. A lot of us early voted. Early voting is ending in a lot of places. So
70 million people. That's between half and a third of everybody. It's certainly. What was the last time? 180?
Yeah, I think we had close to 180 last time. So
so it was creeping toward half, which is quite something.
For
quite over half in some places, yeah.
Yeah. So the woman called up because we have a live show. I think people get confused sometimes when they're on YouTube. This is not a podcast, and that's not the show. The show is 3 hours Monday through Friday on Sirius XM channel 126, and they have all kinds of deals and specials. And if you can afford whatever you can afford, if it's important to you, you can listen to Dr. Greg Carr in the mornings, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Urban View Morning 7 to 10. Larry Daniel Favors is amazing. 10 a.m. Clay Kane, best-selling author of The Grift, noon to 3, and then I come on at 3 o'clock, 3 to 6, every Monday through Friday. So it's a live show. So we have callers. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what they're going to talk about, but it's been our phones have been lit. I know your phone lines have been lit as well, which is, I'm not actually very welcoming of callers. So I'm very excited.
You talk to a lot of people.
I do, but my phones are normally not like your phones probably are more lit in the mornings than mine are because people come in, they're nervous, because it's like there's an accountability. You know what I'm saying? There's a social contract that we're going to have engaging conversation. You're going to know what the hell you're talking about. You're going to talk and get to your point. You're going, my producer's going to hit you with a sound effect. If you take too long, it's nerve-wracking, You
and Joe Madison have that because Daryl was always reminding. He said, "Man, Joe just be cussing people out."
And hang up on you. Yeah.
And hang up on you. Oh my God.
I rarely hang up. I make you hang up. Like I make you want to hang up. So
stick yourself. I'm pretty Tony.
So this past couple of weeks, the lines have been really amazing, actually, and people calling and poll workers. It's just been beautiful. So we get a call. One of the last calls of the day. This was Thursday. Woman calls up. My 18-year-old voted today. I just took him. My husband and I, we took him to vote. And I was like so excited. I was like, "Yay, new voter!" Yeah. She was like, "Carol, wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
Wait till I tell you what he did."
Wait a minute.
So I was
Wait
like,
a minute.
"Oh Lord, let me brace myself." Yeah. So he voted for Trump. I said, "Wait, what?" And I could hear the disappointment. Like she was calling. I don't know why she was calling me. Like I was gonna knock some sense into him or something. Husband's in the background, like,
yes,
and then he's in the background. Wait a minute, that's not in. And so he jumps in, and so I was like, okay, so trying to get all the information, like, why did you? And he didn't read anything, he didn't know anything, and I was like, wow. And his reasoning was a woman can't lead the United States of America.
Yeah, which is unfortunately.
And I said, your mama, you know, your mama, you saying that right in her face. She's right there.
Yeah, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her.
He didn't care. He didn't care. No, and I could tell there was nothing we were going to be able to say. But yesterday, Roderick gave us some insight. You know, there's this whole video game, and there's a little feedback. There's this whole video game community, and it's not just the red pill folk, because there's a red pill thing. There's a lot of things that children, young people are doing that parents have no idea what's happening because headphones. And even if they're not playing video games, they could be in that Twitch space, and people just, there's an indoctrination if you're doing this every day. And parents will have very little control over what their children are doing or feeling and thinking. And it is a very powerful thing. And he took it all the way back to, you know, these sites that gave us like Yiannopoulos, who's not a, you know, not from this country. And there's like, you know, Richard, there's like all of these spaces where our young people can be impacted. And it made a lot of sense, you know, because they're finding community and they're forming themselves, and they want to break away from their parents, and they think they know things that they don't, and they're getting reinforced in this way. And it's kind of like real secret, and it's real, you know, edgy. And there's a lot of racism, and there's a lot of misogyny, and there's a lot of, you know, othering folk, and it's free. It's off the chain. So I was thinking maybe he was a video game person, which a lot of kids are.
He could be. Yeah. You know, we had a extensive conversation on Tuesday. I guess it was Tuesday evening. By the way, you all were talking yesterday about political violence and ballot boxes. And Roy saying you should take some of that money and have people watch ballot boxes at $1 billion that the Democrats have raised. You all talking about the poll watchers. We know from our friend Greg Palast that they have recruited literally tens of thousands of people to harass people at the polls, and Roy being worried, people in there counting votes and people outside screaming at them. Within that context, I just want to, you know, take 30 seconds to lift up and surround the young people at Howard University, because now the vice president has decided that she's going to be there on Tuesday night. The feds have basically taken over the campus. And so Howard will be virtual on Monday, closed on Tuesday, virtual on Wednesday and Thursday, and to be determined after that. They're not taking any chances. But these kids who aren't living off campus are living in the dorms. And so we had a long meeting yesterday. Shout out to Shrikiana Aina and her husband, Holly Garima, her partner at Sankofa, because we're across the street. And so, you know, trying to figure out what to do for and with those young people. On Monday, we'll probably do something. We'll talk about it maybe, you know, in office hours in Nubia for folks who, and then I'll post something on social media for folks who are not yet there. And Tuesday, there may be something. I know that you got the folks coordinated. You taking the early shift and Clay's taking the.
Yeah, I'm gonna be 8 to 10. Me and Larry. You want to pop in? I don't know.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I'm usually down. I'll be down with Roland and Black Star Network, but I will definitely set up in one of the off rooms in that way, because it's too important. We need to be together and thinking. And not only that, those kids don't know what to say. That's what we were talking. I said, what should we do? I said, well, if you need to say. I said, just understand, Tuesday, this is going to be the safest couple of blocks in the world. So don't even worry about that. But now they're not going to be invited to the speech, and it's not going to be decided Tuesday night, because we know, I mean, the donors, the politicos, they're going to have a sampling of them probably, you know, and the symbolic effect of being there is, of course, this is the first major political party candidate in a presidential election in the history of the United States of America is going to be at a black college campus. So, I mean, it really does send a message, but you know, for whatever that's worth or not. But at the same time,
well, no, it's worth.
it is, but I don't know.
I mean, I think we do. Unfortunately, symbolism matters, or we wouldn't be
It
flying
does.
flags and putting our hands over hearts and erecting statues and having monuments. And apparently, this country is built on symbolism.
That's what they say.
Erecting monuments to
That's
people.
right. Go ahead. I'm just gonna walk over.
Yeah. So the power, and I think we should sit in that for a second. The fact that for the first time ever, a presidential nominee who is neck and neck for the highest office in the land will be at an HBCU named for a white person.
Named for General Howard, Chase Chief Seattle, all the way to the Pacific Ocean. That's why y'all don't see me wear Howard stuff. I mean, they black that white man's name up well, and I will wear it from time to time. I'm very happy to be in community with the young people and with the faculty at Howard University and be a HBCU graduate. The one I went to, fortunately, Tennessee is a Native American word. You often see me wear Tuskegee. I don't have any conflict when I wear Native American words that are also the titles of HBCUs. Howard, I don't have a conflict either. I just try to avoid it, even though black people have blacked that name up very well, because it also sends not just the white man's name. There's a class dimension and tension to us that we're going to do the right thing most of the time, but when it's a governance conversation, when it's just us, it gets nasty, and I reject that too. I try to be even, but yeah, it is something, isn't it? So how would you interpret? How would you characterize?
But I think it's wild that you are at Howard.
Mm-hmm.
In many ways, even how we walk in this space, because there's a kind of elite, label that is slammed on people, and we're battling these, these bougie black people versus the, and it's like we're all kind of having this experience. And I feel like in many ways we've been conditioned to be forced to find the problem in other people so that we can feel better about ourselves, as opposed to finding the way that we can be better in community. We were talking just briefly before we came on, and I was like, this is one of the best partnerships I've ever had, because it's not just equal. It's like we push each other to consider things we hadn't considered before. And that's to me the hallmark of a great relationship. Can you make me better? Or do I want to be better because I know you? Do I want to step into different waters, even if I'm uncomfortable, but I know you got me too. Like, I know you got me. So there's almost a freedom in falling,
no question, because you're not falling. That's right.
So I want to say, for all the people who are looking for the offense, like, look at yourself and say, can I be better? And what makes me better? Where am I most inspired? Where can I get, an insight that I don't have currently? Or are you comfortable in your own ignorance, or in your own lack, or your own mediocrity? Or is that so comfortable that you rather wear that every day than to shake that yoke off?
Yeah, no, we got to grow beyond that. It's funny you mentioned the boule, because I was looking around and see if I had Kepra. Was it Kepra Burns that did? There are like 4 histories of the boule, 1 and 2 volumes. Sigma Pi Phi fraternity, 1904, Philadelphia.
Okay, first because I don't even really know what it is. If I'm being honest, I just know it's like how people use Hotep.
That's
boule. I was like, okay, I think I know what it means, but I don't really.
Which is funny you say that too. As important that you make that observation. We were talking on Tuesday in class, Tuesday afternoon, about AI in the context of papers, and students got papers and things, and one of the young brothers who was a computer science major said, AI is tied to a commercial structuring apparatus. It isn't about, these companies are pushing it and they're misrepresenting it. He said, as far as I'm concerned, AI is autocorrect on steroids. And that just clarified everything you can't do. Now, that having been said, that monster document that it continues to grow now is getting close to, I guess, 1,600 pages that, that the narrative team has put together. If you search through it, you'll see, even when we talked about Henry Minton in 1904 and Philadelphia and the Sigma Pi Phi fraternity, which is not an undergraduate fraternity. It's the only one that is widely recognized in Black communities that was not, that isn't tied to an undergraduate student body. You don't have to be a college. You don't get into it at college. But to your wider observation about us trying to work together and not being against each other, that organization, which was doctors and lawyers and folks who had kind of gone out into the world and made a way for themselves, their families, and their communities, crucially, was committed to the uplift of the race, as are all those organizations. Now, what that looks like is going to change from generation to generation, but it has the nickname that they have, the Boule, that particular organization, which is the oldest Black Greek letter organization, by 2 years, predating Alpha Alpha. A young brother is doing a paper on Alpha yesterday, and he came to Sankofa. I just sat up there and they come and then we talk. I was there for hours yesterday, and he wanted to talk about that. And then some more students came and some more. And then this young lady from the Gambia came. She was doing a paper on something else. And so we all started talking. And so I had to give them basically a history lesson on the origin of Greek letter organizations and how they really were Africanized. And it came down to this, and this is where I'll end with it, not on what we talked about yesterday, but as it relates to what we're talking about now. After desegregation, which really didn't desegregate much. I mean, by law, it did a lot, but the class tensions in Black communities that had been forestalled by Jim and Jane Crow, by apartheid, began to rise. And Black communities started looking more like white communities in this sense. The Black quote unquote elite, who were trapped in many ways, and because of that trapping, we were building a community in a way, in part through force, but one that had taken into our governance formations to choice too. We love being, well, now that you can move into that other neighborhood and they knock down restrictive covenants, now that you can go to that other school, that community starts looking more like the class that the working class folk and that the poor folk have contempt for, if that group has contempt for them. So now here we are in 2024, and people say, "Oh, you boule," but what does that even mean? That's a marker for what the tensions. Now you're assuming that these people don't love their people because they don't live in your neighborhood anymore, and they're raising money for scholarships. They're bringing people on college tours. The college tour is a Black invention. Where does that money come from? It comes from the church. It comes from the Alumni Association. It comes from the Black Greek letter organizations. So I don't know how we solve for that, especially when AKA, I was reading an article. I won't look
call it out.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know whether, let me see if I can find it quickly. There's a sister who wrote in the New Yorker, I want to say. It was a long article. Hold on. You give me 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Jasmine Hughes. There it is. Right there on there. Jasmine Hughes. And don't go anywhere. I'm just going to reference it. It's on page 16 of the October 28th New Yorker, which is interesting how this works, right? It's interesting how this works. This happened with Obama. In fact, that's what Ta-Nehisi Coates writes about, and we were 8 years in power. Obama wins. All of a sudden, all these people who have been working all along, and the new generation of people who had just started working but were working nonetheless, get visibility. Does Jasmine Hughes get this long article in the October 28th issue of the New Yorker called Alpha Girls, Inside the Tight-Knit World of Kamala Harris's Sorority? Does she get that? There she is with some of her line sisters at Howard University in 1986. I guarantee you, there are scores of white people who, for the first time in their life, saw the word line and the word sister together in a phrase. But does Jasmine Hughes get this byline if Kamala Harris is not running for president? So
No.
I'm just making that point. Even as we talk about bourgeoisie, this is a complicated conversation to have.
I don't become a journalist without the Newark riots. So
that's right.
We can't cherry pick our liberation.
That'll preach. That'll preach. We can't cherry pick our liberation. No.
Yeah, we got to receive all of it because it's the domino effect, right? She gets elected. We've been having this internal, external conversation. What happens next? And I'm like, it's good either way. I mean, not good. And it won't be good either way. It'll be bad either way, and it'll be good either way, right?
That's right.
What I'm saying is that, do we stop doing what we do? Are we still who we are? Are we still who we say we are? Are we going to be who we want to be? No matter what happens on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whenever the thing is, we're still here. You know, me listening to the barn, which, you know, I told you I interviewed Wright Thompson this week. And what is significant is that I have the foundation of you talking about Mose Wright, Darhy, and you know, like we got the full lesson in class with Carr. So I'm not coming into this book ignorant. This is not my first introduction to, but what I'm getting a little, because he was in the room with the cousin that was in the bed with him, and who was never interviewed for 30 years, by the way, you know, and he said, I was there, and no one interviewed me. So all of the myths, you know, of what happened that day with people who weren't there, you know, the lies that those two told afterwards, after they were exonerated for killing him, or a jury of people that they knew and grew up with. But what I walk away with is that even in an Emmett Till, like there's one little passage where his cousin, Emmett would, you know, he came from Chicago with this confidence in himself. But at the same time, he's 14. So he's got a lack of confidence in himself because he's chubby, you know, he's working through it, but he's still from Chicago. And he could hold his head up, and he couldn't understand the jumping off of the curb and the version of the eyes. And like, it just seemed foreign. And there was a line where his cousin said he envied the confidence that Emmett had. And he felt ashamed at how he was taught to cower, you know, and how he was taught to be silent, and how he was taught to be less than. He was ashamed of that to this day, 60 years later. You know, he wrote his memoir 60 years after that happened. To be ashamed. I'm looking, you know, but Emma's not here. And I imagine his brutal murder kept a lot of Black boys silent, and a lot of parents scared, and a lot of parents showing that image to their children as a message to be quiet and know your place.
And we've talked about that. Yeah, the Till generation, the whole idea of be inside before the street lights come on, which was an article of faith in Black communities, certainly in the South, certainly where I grew up, and that generation. I mean, and for some, it sparked the revolutionary spirit for them, as we know. Rosa Parks in her 40s said, you know, I saw that and I said, I couldn't go back. I listened to Mamie Till and I couldn't go back. Our new ancestor, Dory Ladner, and she and her sister Joyce in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. You see, it was the murder of Emmett Till in many ways set the fire that became the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Right. But you have to fight that fear. And for you to raise that in the context of the conviction of Brett Hankerson by a federal jury, and shout out to, if you're going to say in a social structure sense, Black America's Attorney General, shout out to Kristen Clark, Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, which, as we will talk about a little bit later, they would strengthen actually in this crime against humanity playbook called the Mandate for Leadership. They would strengthen the Department of Justice. They would simply turn it into the President of the United States' personal cudgel, because they're hoping for a Donald Trump victory next week. But Kristen Clark used it to the degree that it has its limits, and there are limits to the law. She used it the way it's supposed to be used. That division used it the way it's supposed to be used. Hankerson, you're a killer, sir. And so are y'all your funky friends in the jackbooted thugs that shot into that apartment complex and murdered Breonna Taylor where she slept. Something that 4 years ago this time was not only on our minds, but in our mouths. As, you know, people moved to Louisville, as people moved to Atlanta, as the Minnesota Lynx, and shout out, I heard you shout them out too. Shout out to the New York Liberty for finally climbing and getting to the top of a hill they have climbed many times since there's been a Women's National Basketball Association, for winning that championship. And I'll put a footnote on that as well and say congratulations to the Los Angeles Trolley Dodgers, because, you know, that's where the Dodgers came from. That name came from Brooklyn. And if Robert Moses hadn't gotten in the way, there would be a parade in Brooklyn this week, because the Brooklyn Dodgers Dome Stadium, which is what Walter O'Malley wanted to build in downtown Brooklyn, actually where the Nets arena is, ironically, was blocked by one man who never held elective office. Of course, that was Robert Moses, the city planner. But shout out to them.
Wait, and that Nets arena is where the Liberty won.
Exactly. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? And as you talked about, the owner, non-white, Asian, saying, no, these women, this sport, this institution deserves the same equitable treatment. No. I mean, it sends a message. So yeah, so congratulations to the borough of Brooklyn for the first championship in Brooklyn since the Dodgers beat the Yankees that one time and all the Dodger Yankees wars of the 1940s and 50s. But since Jack Roosevelt Robinson paraded those streets and lifted the trophy, shout out to them. And of course, now, of course, they're in LA. And so I guess that's California 1, New York 0. Let's try to make it California 2, New York 0 this week. But at any rate, now think about it. But in that context, and I'm sorry, Brother Joe. I mean, y'all gave Fat Joe the business. It's like on the radio, but in this context of the murder of Breonna Taylor 4 years ago, this was at the front of our mouths. And when the Minnesota Lynx, as we saw Alton Sterling, of course, Big George Floyd right there in the streets of Minneapolis. And we saw what happened not only in and around Minneapolis with George Floyd, but Fernando Castillo. Before that, Javar Clark. And those women, not just women of African descent, white women, all the team had those shirts and stood together. And then the Atlanta Dream in the middle of that reckoning summer, so to speak, of the summer of 2020. Those sisters were like, we're against our owner. That would be a woman who used to be in the United States Senate, but isn't in the United States Senate anymore, Kelly Loeffler, because people who moved to Louisville to sit in those streets, think about all of the women and men who basically moved down there. You think about Until Freedom and that crew. You think about young people who are from Louisville, like my student, Sean Ali Mickens, the grandnephew of Muhammad Ali, who is from Louisville, and everybody went home because remember, nobody was on campuses. School was virtual, and we were all trying to figure it out. Well, some people just moved to Louisville, and then they took that whole operation and moved to Georgia and pulled across the line John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, two senators, one black, one Jewish, and the Jewish senator whose father was deeply involved with John Lewis, the Jewish senator who as a kid worked in as an intern, the office of Congressman John Lewis. Is a great new book on John Lewis, by the way, just finished. In fact, let me see if I can pull it here. I took the dust jacket off because I've been traveling around with it, but I enjoyed it. I mean, there are other books. This is David Greenberg's book, John Lewis, A Life. Pretty long book, almost 700 pages with an index. You see the index at 684 there, and it goes up through. Actually, it's interesting how these things work. They never quite make it to these numbers. This is 696. I gotta think it's an industry thing. Maybe they don't go right to it, and there, as far as I'm concerned, better books on John Lewis, but this is a nice kind of reader friendly in an age of deteriorating reading skills, which we are determined to fight to the last breath. People always want something a little bit more simple. And I'm like, yeah, but the people who are giving you that, they don't simplify as theirs. You got to understand when you are being gaslit. But, that was just 4 years ago. It seems like an eternity ago. And so for you to open us today, Prof, with the conviction of Hankerson by a division of a cabinet level entity, the Department of Justice, that would look very different if folk hadn't intervened and disrupted the plans that are now written 4 years later in this document. Kristen Clark would not be the deputy for civil rights. There wouldn't have been a conviction because it wouldn't have been a jury, because it wouldn't have been a federal trial. In fact, the killers of Breonna Taylor, the killers of George Floyd, the killers of all of them might by now have been invited, as will be invited, the rioters in the hillbilly riot of January the 6th, 2021. They may have been invited to the White House to receive presidential citations This man has already told you what he's going to do for the people who attacked the police, who shot, who busted windows, who took dumps in the well of the Congress. Now, you know, the reason I got up, of course, was to get my little sticker, and I don't know what I did with it. It's trying to evade me because it knows the point I'm going to make, which is I don't and will never wear an American flag. If you see me with an American flag on, then what you should probably do is confine me, subdue me, or perhaps even take fatal action, because that is not me. Someone has snatched my body, and that's a replicant, because you're not going to see me with a flag. But I got the flag sticker like everybody does. It says I voted. So, hey, I don't know what it is. It's hiding from me now, and I ain't going to look for it. That's how little I value it. But the vote that it represents, I value completely. I exercise my franchise. I have to do that. But it's quite striking that that trial and that conviction and that jury did not stem from something that happened when, like, in 1955 with Emmett Lewis Till, and we think about his cousin who was there in the bedroom that night, and a book like The Barn. I think I have it in the other room. I don't see it in here. You know, not reviving, reminding a previous work, the work of Keith Beauchamp, for example, the filmmaker who has published extensively on this, the work, and you can go back into the in-class archive and you can see our conversations, and we show all those books. Clenora Hudson Weems, Black woman, who has written extensively about that, A Song for Emmett Till. The poems that were published by Third World Press, Haki Mahabooty, those stories told over and over again. The great Henry Hampton and Eyes on the Prize, who interviewed the cousin. So there are so many streams, but Breonna Taylor wasn't killed 70 years ago, 69 years ago. Breonna Taylor was killed 4 years ago. And the fact that it almost seems like ancient history, the fact that something that was in headline after headline after headline, the fact that something that caused the titans of industry to throw a few pennies at DEI out of fear that the whole thing was about to be renegotiated, the thing that caused municipalities to take down statues before the people drug them into the river, as they did in London, the thing that for a moment sparked the imagination that we can renegotiate the terms of this entire project, the thing that must always be suppressed by those who like the system as it is and will concede only when enough people force them to concede. It is quite striking to think that this news was not on the front pages of the paper. This was not on the front page of the late edition of the New York Times today. This is not on the front page of the website Above the Fold, because there's an election going on. But there was an election going on 4 years ago, and but for the intervention of Black people across the political spectrum. Because if you think for a moment that everyone was on one accord on the election of 2020, then you're not paying attention. I'm not paying attention. We're not paying attention. But we set that aside enough to intervene, in the words of Linda Sarsour, to put our best opponent in the White House. And then we started failing again, because Joe Biden, and this is going to come as a shock to some folk, probably nobody who convenes with the thousands of us who convene weekly here, but Joe Biden isn't Jesus. I'm sorry, I had to say it. I'm sorry, he's not Jesus. And that should be blasphemous for folk who are very clear about what Jesus represents. I'm sorry, Reverend Wright. I had to just say Joe Biden, although knowing our elder Jeremiah Wright, he would probably preach that from a pulpit, and probably would have preached it many times from the pulpit of Trinity United Church of Christ between the election last time and the federal election this time. Joe Biden, not Jesus. And you shouldn't treat him like Jesus. Sorry, Billy Porter. You can kiss the back of a man's hand. It should probably, anyway, I don't know. I'm not sure. I know what animates that. I think it must be a terrible thing to walk through the world worried about what other people think about you at the center of your soul. But anyway, he's not Jesus.
Ouch.
And I'm saying, no, I'm just saying, I mean, you know, why would you kiss this man's hand on Juneteenth in the White House lawn? I understand, because you feel motivated. There's gratitude there. You know, that kind of look, particularly as you kissing the back of the man's hand and then looking at the camera with the under eye look, making sure that the camera gets the picture of you kissing the man's hand. At least the statue of the black man they had kneeling at the feet of Abraham Lincoln as Lincoln freed the slaves in Emancipation Park here in Washington, D.C. At least that was a statue, although that man did live, as we talked about in class. And at least he wasn't looking up before a camera, he was looking down. But in your case, you have an excuse. I mean, context means everything. But that having been said, Joe Biden's not Jesus. The day after the inauguration, as you made this point over and over again, with now vice president, at one time senator, at one time attorney general, and next week, hopefully president, Kamala Harris. Yay! Okay. Here we go. Meaning what? Don't make the mistake of 2020. Don't make the mistake of 2008 to 2012. And again, from 2012 to 2016, because we got stuck with the bill for Barack Obama in the form of Donald Trump and the white nationalist rocket he rode in on, which had been firing at full strength since Barry Goldwater came riding out of the West with his racist ass rants in 1964. We got stuck with that bill. But we, contrary to what our friend and brother Ta-Nehisi Coates writes in his collection of essays, We Were 8 Years in Power, comparing the 8 years of the Barack Obama administration to the 8 years that Lerone Bennett Jr. chronicles better than anybody writing to date in his book, Black Power USA, the years of Reconstruction in the 19th century. We were not in power from 2008 to 2016. There was a president of African descent, but there weren't enough people to force that president to do anything. Now, for those who will say that elections don't matter and you can force Donald Trump to do the same thing, I am in full and absolute agreement. I want to know how many of you are willing not only to say that with your full chest, but to get the strap, you see, because to force that man and that regime to do what you want, it's going to take a little bit more than lobbyists. A little bit more than filling the streets and protests. It's going to take a little bit more than think tanks and writing policy. It's going to take a little bit more than organizing for peaceful pressure. It's going to take a little bit more. It's going to take the strap, you see? So if you want, and now, I mean, you know, shout out to Jill Stein. There are those who really want that, because they're not going to be doing the shooting. They're going to be sitting, shout out to Jill Stein, in their villa somewhere overseas, writing about it, talking about it as you're in the streets fighting for your literal lives. And I'm saying that confrontation will probably come to the streets of whatever is left of the United States of America when it finally does break apart, because we know that things rise and fall. But if you really want that to happen, I understand the logic behind it. However, and people will accuse me of being counter-revolutionary or neoliberal, and I'm saying neoliberal. I think those are my friends who would call me a neoliberal for taking the position that I take, really make me laugh, because, you know, they've recently learned the word, and I'm grateful for that, because it gives them some more words in their vocabulary. I'm not sure they understand the word, but then for those who I'm clear understand the word in the context, they're ideologues. And, you know, it reminds me of the Billy Joel song, Angry Young Man, you know. Take a moment to cheer for the angry young man with his fist in the air and his head in the sand. In other words, you can be ideologically pure and by yourself. So shout out to y'all. But 4 years ago, you said Breonna Taylor, you said George Floyd, you said Ahmaud Arbery, you in the streets, not just black people, but all these folk flooding the streets. And a lot of young people out there. Everybody got a mask on. Nobody knows what tomorrow holds. At some point, some utter feckless ass clown, before he gets the Chinese $60 Bibles, is holding another one upside down in front of a church as the smoke has cleared what is now Black Lives Matter Plaza, which, by the way, in the new John Lewis biography, is written very beautifully near the end of the book, because near the end of his life, John Lewis told his staff, I want to go see this writing in the street. And so they took John Lewis down there, too weak to put on a suit and dress. So they gave him a little, you know, kind of track suit, some loose pants and a top, and then But then as they got there, they said, no, they went back to John Lewis's residence in DC and got him a dress that was a little bit closer to what should be appropriate for taking perhaps a final picture. And so that picture we see of John Lewis standing on the lettering there with the mayor, Muriel Bowser, who's got so many problems as an elected official because she's defending her city from the federal attempt to take over the city at the time. But shout out to the founders and the warriors and Harriet's wildest dream and the folks who fight most visibly against police violence in the District of Columbia, because she's being pushed, as she should be pushed, over the cliff until reform or revolution, because this is the same mayor who will preside over the continuing gentrification and, as Lamont King would say, real estate violence that attends it, and the police violence that supports it and defends it in the District of Columbia against poor people, against Black people, against brown people. And so, but we don't push Muriel Bowser. We don't push Joe Biden, who is not Jesus. We didn't push Barack Obama. We were not 8 years in power. There was a sliver of people who got some benefits, and it's better to have Barack Obama for 8 years than it would have been to have the alternative, either John McCain or Mitt Romney. And there are there's policy evidence to back all of that up. The Obamacare, that the MAGA Muppet, he looks so much like a Muppet, doesn't he? The MAGA Muppet, Mike Johnson, is now talking about with that slit that passes for a mouth, and we're gonna overturn Obamacare. Yeah, gotta go big. I imagine that going big is something that he has fantasized about since the time he came out of his mother's womb in Louisiana. But that having been said, it's better to have Barack Obama for somebody who was able to have, for the first time in their life, insurance coverage. If you got Sirius XM and 126, you heard Lamont and I talking with his friend and my friend, but not like that, Ananda Lewis, talking about her challenges with cancer, with breast cancer, and how there have been moments in recent memory where she had to pause treatments, and she's combining the treatments that you might get from a doctor that went to a medical school and is prescribing medicine and chemotherapy of some sort, and the homeopathic choice. She's not choosing either or. She's blending it. But there were moments when that treatment is so expensive, she had to pause. And the enemy of wellness and cancer is often time. So if you got to pause because you don't have coverage, or you got to pause because you can't pay the extra money, then yes, the Affordable Care Act is not perfect, but it exists. And when they come in and eviscerate it, I'm not talking about, you, Prof, or me, or anyone else who's worked a long time, at least not in the first round, you see, who is paid into a pension plan, who has some nominal health care. And mind you, not in the first round. They're going to come for that too. But I'm talking about the people who have nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, who have nowhere to turn, who are close to the edge. It matters whether there's a Barack Obama, but guess what? There could have been a lot more done if we had done a lot more other than vote. That's going to be the case next week, because we've got to now join the 70 plus million who have already voted to pull this over the line. And once that happens, yay, now we got our best opponent in the House. One of the most, I don't know if you saw this, Prof, one of the most poignant, and of course it's all propaganda, but then one thing about propaganda, particularly when it's dealing with stereotype at its best is built on at least some truth, some accuracy. I want to say truth, some accuracy. So the barbershop is a fetish for everybody around election time. It's like the church pulpit, right? But I don't know if you saw, I don't know whether it came out. I saw it yesterday, so maybe it just came out. Vice President Harris in Philly in this barbershop. I know that barbershop well, having lived in Philadelphia almost 20 years. It's my adopted hometown. Them boys with no hair on their head and the full beards, them the Akis, as they may call them in Philly, with the long hair. I mean, talking with brothers and breaking down policy, having conversation. You can't fake that. Your staff can't prep you for that. A great deal of that has to be drawn from life experience. And so for people who are saying Kamala Harris is not black, I encourage y'all, just look at this little 10, 15-minute video where she's sitting in North Philly with these brothers Is it staged? Absolutely. But it cracked me up because one of the young cats had on a zip up with an insignia emblazoned over his breast, and it says Sankofa Freedom Academy. He played basketball for Sankofa Freedom Academy. Well, Sankofa Freedom Academy is the K-12 Freedom School. Shout out to my sister, Dr. Aisha Immani, the CEO and founder of Sankofa Freedom Academy, because we wrote that charter and got that charter from the city of Philadelphia, because the people who convened to create Sankofa Freedom Academy, our sister Kelly Mickens, Kelly Sparrow Mickens, who is a Nubian, Dr. Kelly Sparrow Mickens, who's written the history of Philadelphia Freedom Schools, tells that story. So when I saw that glimpse of him, I said, I know exactly where these Negroes are. You can't fake that. And I'm saying that this is a testament to the fact that there is a real choice. And it ain't but two people. It's not Claudia De La Cruz. It is not Cornel West. It's not Jill Stein, who, you know, is excited about the possibility they may play the role of spoiler. There are people who wouldn't vote in this election if they couldn't vote for one of those three candidates. Then you should go too and vote. Vote for one of those three, because you weren't going to vote. Now, for the other people who would vote for one of those three instead of the other two because you would never vote for either of them, yeah, well, then you can vote because you weren't going to vote for either the two of them. I'm talking about the people, as Clay Claim reminds us, constitute the majority. 70 million people voted early. I'm sorry, 70 million people voted before Tuesday, and that number could still go up, right? So, you know, in a couple of states, a few polities, but more than that won't vote at all. And 4 years ago, when the urgency of voting was played out in a physical drama amid tear gas in Washington, D.C., across the street from the White House, when it was played out in a hail of bullets in Louisville, when it was played out on a street in front of Cup Foods in North Minneapolis, when it was played out in stark contrast drama by a little disease that brought the world to a halt. When it was played out that way, even the ball players, led by the sisters, said no more. And so, you know, even as we receive news this week that LeBron James has endorsed Kamala Harris, which is not as big a risk perhaps as we might think it is, but at the same time is pretty big risk. You know, your child's favorite ball player is LeBron James, and wearing your Make America Great Again hat when you buy your overpriced season tickets, your child is rooting for LeBron James as you are rooting for Donald Trump. So there are some risks involved. In fact, it's interesting. I'm trying to remember, where did I see this? Because now I'm trying to, this is something I hadn't planned on talking about, but I can't remember, but it'll have to come to me later. But it was a history of political endorsements, and it started with celebrity political endorsements, and it started in recent memory with Michael Jordan, of course, and Harvey Gantt in North Carolina versus Jesse Helms and the famous Republicans buy sneakers too comment. So there's a risk involved. But as we kind of think about this where we open, there is obviously a lot at stake. We won't rehearse all of those things today. We won't rehearse many of them because this is the Saturday before the Tuesday. And we know that whatever happens on election day, and everybody who is eligible to should vote if you haven't already voted, if you're in the United States, wherever you are. In Meemaw's territory, that would be Alabama. I think that's what they say they call K.I.V., the chain smoking governor of Alabama. Meemaw, which, you know, convinced Seth Meyers thinks that little Les Graham in South Carolina calls his imaginary grandma Meemaw, or mother. But Alabama doesn't have early voting, so everybody got to go on the day. But there was an article in today's New York Times, if I could find it quickly. Oh man, they are really going in. Here we go. This is Alabama. So if you're in Alabama, Alabama House seat, once the GOP given, is now up for grabs. This is the young brother, Shamari Figures, whose father is a civil rights hero in Alabama, was in the Alabama legislature for years, sitting alongside my man, Hank Sanders, Senator Hank Sanders. Shout out to Hank and Fire Rose Sanders. Montgomery, Alabama, away from the presidential battleground states that are claiming most of the party's attention, a redrawn House district in Ruby Red, Alabama, could prove crucial to their ambitions in Washington. Formerly a safe GOP seat, the 2nd Congressional District is now highly competitive. For Republicans, holding it would help protect their razor-thin majority in the House. For Democrats, it offers a rare opportunity to flip a seat in the House. Alabama is not a battleground, but this seat is, said Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas, a rising Democratic star who joined a panel of prominent Black women on Sunday in the church in Montgomery. Quote, a lot of people will try to pretend as if you don't matter, she told the audience, but you do, end quote. Shamari Figures, who used to work in the Justice Department, actually when Barack Obama was president, is in the race. He's running against a Republican challenger, a lawyer, Caroline Dobson. She's received the backing of the white nationalists, no surprise. In the 2nd Congressional, there's only one Black member of Congress from Alabama, and that, of course, is Terry Sewell out of that Black belt in Alabama. Well, Shamari Figures would join her, and this is a case where the white nationalists of the super attenuated majority in the Alabama legislature tried to gerrymander that district so egregiously, they call it cracking and packing, as we've talked about many times, to prevent just this thing. But they were sued. There is, after all, a Voting Rights Act of 1965, and whereas the Black white supremacist Clarence Thomas did his best to kick the teeth out of it, along with his comrades and colleagues, including Mr. Balls and Strikes, John Boyd Roberts, and the Christian soldier, Sam Alito, and others. Of course, Tony Scalia among them, tried to kick the teeth out with Shelby County versus Holder. There still is a Voting Rights Act, and they successfully were able to show this racial gerrymander in Alabama, which is what puts this district in play. If you go out on Tuesday in Alabama, you can put another Black congressperson in, another person, regardless of racial background, who will vote against the white nationalist agenda. Because if Kamala Harris is elected, and this was actually in yesterday's Financial Times, is this Friday or Saturday? It's Saturday. Because typically when I come into Urban View, you know, I didn't read. It's so funny, Prof. The guys who work in the building, it's so funny to me when they come in. I'm in there, you know, 6 o'clock, whatever, just before 6, where I'm reading the paper, and they walk by, and it's one guy who's a tech in the building, who, you know, obviously, you know about this stuff better than I do. They take care of all the technical stuff. They come in, and he's like, "You still read the physical paper?" I said, "Yeah, man." He said, "I didn't know there was anybody left that does it." And of course, we're right down the hall from POTUS, is it? Politics of the United States, which is hilarious because Nikki Haley was in there on Wednesday, and
isn't it wild? She has a radio show nobody knows about.
See, it was great, you know, and you know better than I do. They got more secret chambers. They turn on the lights, and you hear the angels singing like, "Oh, like damn! I didn't even know that studio was that big." It's across from the Black Eagle studio.
Yeah, but you in one of the best studios.
Oh, no question.
Anywhere.
No question.
Yeah.
No question. And even when Lamont says, you know, don't touch nothing, I feel that way every time I come into the cathedral that is the Black Eagle's nest. I mean, and I'm grateful because, in fact, we were talking about it yesterday, me and Daryl, because one day, about a month ago, there was a headphone set that had a microphone on it. And so it was where I sit. And so I put it on. So it got amazing. What's this doing here? Oh, I brought it in. Okay, anyway. And so then yesterday it wasn't in there. And so I said, oh, it don't matter to me. I'm just talking. But at the end, Daryl was like, oh, I didn't bring it in. It's in here in the other room. He said, that's Joe's. He brought it from home. I said, oh, no, man, you got to bring that back. That's Joe Madison. I'll wear that headphone. But I feel the weight and the investment that you have made in all of us. But, you know, I'm speaking now just for myself. And I feel the responsibility of coming into that space because that's, you know, Joe Madison, as you say, often the house that Joe Madison built. Although he and you will cut a collar off. I'm a teacher. So somebody say the craziest thing in the world. I'll be like, okay, let's work with that. And my whole thing is eventually we'll get to it. But yeah, she came in Wednesday and Daryl was like, yeah, I remember when Glenn Beck walked by here and Joe was like, go get him. And they brought him in. I said, well, go get her. And then, of course, Catherine, like, well, she has done do unscripted. And I said, I wasn't going to ask her nothing about politics. I was going to ask her about her father, who made transition actually on the 16th of June this year. And, after offering condolences, I wanted to ask her, what was it like growing up on a Black college campus? At the campus of Voorhees, where your daddy worked for decades? What was it like selling clothes and other things to Black people as your parents did, and working in a store where you had all those Black customers? What was it like, eating food and wearing clothes and putting gas in your tank that was come from a salary of a man who couldn't get a job at other places and who went to the Black college? And they said, come on, I just want to know. We can set aside the politics. We ain't gonna talk about Trump or Harris. I want you to talk to these people about what it meant to live inside a Black governance formation, just out of curiosity, because I guarantee you no one has ever asked you that question. But unfortunately, she couldn't make it. But the point is that in that context, I'm thinking about now how 4 years ago, the conversation was very different. And yet, who has stayed laser focused? Who will be out in droves in Alabama on Tuesday to try to stop Shamari Figures, which means stop you? Well, that's going to be the people for whom the only thing that changes on the calendar are the dates. But they are laser focused on their agenda. Otherwise, they would not be following a playbook that started not in 1971 when Lewis Powell wrote that memo that we talked about a couple of weeks ago that led to, among other things, the creation 2 years later of the Heritage Foundation, that led to, a few years later, the first iteration of the Mandate for Leadership in 1981. And every 4 years since then, they've created one. And under the Reagan administration, Kevin Roberts, the leader of Project 2025, brags that maybe 60% of what they wrote in that first one was actually implemented in the federal government. Y'all remember that, the attack on organized labor, the firing of the air traffic controllers, the degrading of and the undermining of the administrative state. All of that stuff comes out, much of it comes out of the Heritage Foundation and their first Mandate for Leadership, which I guess you could call Project 1980. And that, of course, ended the presidency of James Earl Carter. But I said all that to say that nothing has changed, but not since 1971. Yesterday, I was headed to Sankofa to sit there, as we are in a very we're in a flux. We're all in a flux. We're going to be, which is why we take this responsibility very seriously, because, people spend their time with us. And, I should pause here as well and lift up Brother Paris from who lives in New Jersey, from New York, who called in on Wednesday on Sirius and, thanked us for this work that we're doing. He never misses. You probably hear Paris. And he told the whole world on Sirius that he was a Nubian, but he had a stroke and he had to make some cutbacks. And one of them was the subscription there. So he relies on the YouTube. And this goes, I talked to somebody at Dory Ladner's memorial, an elder whose mother had made transition, whose father had made transition recently. We talked about this, you remember, Prof. And he's talking about how to the day that this elder made transition, he was in his facility listening to us. And so to know that responsibility is beyond I'm beyond grateful, for us all to be able to be together, and I take that very seriously. And so I ran to a retired DC homicide detective who was a Nubian. I saw him the other day, and some brothers headed to mosque yesterday. I was in Adams Morgan buying some books, and I came out, and these brothers were coming down. They stopped me. We started talking. They said, y'all headed to mosque? He said, yeah, we're going to stop and get something to eat first, but we just wanted, to pass on to you and Karen. Thank you all, because, it was an elder and two younger brothers. And so we know that we are here, and we take this very seriously and take this responsibility very seriously. And so 4 years ago, we thought we were close to an event horizon, to the edge. We thought we were close. And in a similar vein, Donald Trump, with the cast of characters, many of whom have endorsed Kamala Harris because they understand that they don't agree with a single thing in her domestic policy. But these are the hawks. These are the warmongers. I will never see eye to eye, eye to nose, eye to ass, eye to foot, eye to head, eye to nothing with John Bolton. John Bolton is a murderer of people through the apparatus of the state. Warmonger. Shit, if it was up to John Bolton, we'd be bombing North Korea. I mean, John Bolton, read his book, The Room Where It Happened, which is just a kind of valedictory message on a career of this kind of foolishness. You pull on John Bolton and Donald Rumsfeld falls out. I mean, so this is this is Dr. Strangelove, but he endorsed. He said, you can't deal with Donald Trump. Okay, so why are you saying this? I mean, Liz Cheney now, they keep keying. Who knows? In the Harris administration, what cabinet position is she gonna get? Or because she can't go back home, to run for nothing. But this could be an elevation. But never forget, her daddy's a warmonger, and her domestic policy, they're going to disagree, even as her sister is queer. This maybe cause her to back up a little bit, but let's be clear. These people are not endorsing Kamala Harris because they believe in the kind of things that we believe in. They not like us. You understand? But what they do understand is the stability of the network in a global social structure that has allowed them to do quite well. A so-called international community, and I say so-called because when the BRICS met, as we talked about last week, when the BRICS met, when Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and now expanded to include other countries like Ethiopia and Egypt and others knocking at the door, everybody from Cuba, and I mean, Iran's at the table. It was very interesting. I saw, who did I see yesterday? Somewhere I was talking, I said, your president was shaking hands. Oh, it was Haile. I was pulling Haile's leg. I was like, Haile, because he was sitting with some of his old heads. These Ethiopian cats, where they sit together and drink more coffee than I've drank in my life. And I'm a coffee addict, but they can drink more coffee than I've drank in my whole life. Since my granddaddy got me hooked on the damn stuff. They could drink more than that in an hour. If you sit and watch some Ethiopian dudes, they just sit there and drink that. And he was sitting with his boys. I say, man, I seen y'all mans over there shaking hands with Putin. Talking about Abiy, the prime minister of Ethiopia. Yeah. I said, yeah. I mean, the BRICS is making a takeoff. So it wasn't just the BRICS that met last week. During that same week, the International Money Fund met. World Bank, they were meeting. The so-called Bretton Woods organizations. They met here in D.C., in the Georgetown section of D.C. They had their meeting. Now, that's the old international order. And in order to put that hammer down, you got to keep the network of states together, whether it be the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, whether it be the United Nations run by the Security Council. And then you have to make concessions only if enough people push back. The BRICS is not Jesus. The BRICS is not going to save you, but the BRICS poses a threat to the old order. And guess who is going to be a counterbalance to that? Not Donald Trump. The John Boltons of the world, the Liz Cheneys of the world, the General Miley's of the world, the what's that racist who was the chief of staff that called Representative Frederica Wilson an empty barrel and now says that Trump is a fascist. I see his face. John, what's his name? The chief of staff, the general, the Marine whose son died in the Middle East. Anyway, he not for you. What he's for is the international order. They're endorsing her because they expect that she's not going to change the international order. Now, Kamala Harris has already said she wants to have a different relationship with Africa. Is it going to be Pan-Africanist? No. Is it going to be for Black self-determination? No, not unless you push her that way. But never forget, her mother's father was living as an Indian ambassador in Southwest Africa. That's why when she went to Africa last year, she stopped there, because she had visited him as a little girl. So understand, and I'm not talking about just personal stories. I'm saying I'm using that as a proxy for a different conversation. Yes, John Kelly. Thank you, Karen. John Kelly. So I was thinking about John Bolton, and John was stuck in my head. So John Kelly. But these people are not endorsing Kamala Harris because they believe in a woman's right to terminate a pregnancy or take care of her own, make her own health decisions. They're voting for Kamala Harris because she's not going to pull the United States out of NATO and cede the rest of Europe, if he could imagine it, to Vladimir Putin. And that's not because, as John Henry Clark used to say in some stories, it ain't no good guys. That's not because I am against a multipolar world. I'm saying that that's inevitable. What they're praying for is continuing something that emerged in full bloom at the end of World War II, and that they are trying to continue to forestall. They don't want instability as North Korea sends troops to fight with Russia against Ukraine. They don't want instability as the killers of the Israeli Defense Force, who have now engaged in a wholesale war on Lebanon, claiming they chasing terrorists. We killed the leader of Hamas. Yeah, and you know what happens? A new leader comes. Now Just wait. Pause. 3, 2, 1. We have to kill the leader of Hamas. You act like we ain't seen this show before. BB, you murderer, you mass murderer. They just bombed Gaza again yesterday. They are in Lebanon. They're close to Beirut. Understand what these killers are doing. BB don't want Kamala Harris in there because is she going to change for U.S. foreign policy? No, not unless she's forced to, and that's on us. But would she change U.S. foreign policy if she were pushed? I think she would, if you get enough people. Would Donald Trump change it if he was pushed? Yes, I think he would. If you get enough people, going to take a whole lot more people and maybe some political violence. In that case, in her case, it might just take a whole lot more people. People say that's theoretical. Well, so was Karl Marx. Don't get cute. Because if you want to go start talking about Lenin, you're going to have to then continue with Stalin. And you can talk about Lenin and Stalin. You got to bring in Trotsky. And then you had to bring in Trotsky. You're going to have to talk about how the thing branched off here and the people were fighting here and there. And you're going to have to talk about people saying, well, I don't support killing all those Russians and dumping them in the forest. So, but I'm saying, if you go back to the Communist International, if you go back to that, to the Communist Manifesto, I understand all that. But we're not talking about sitting in the British Museum Library for 11 or 12 hours a day like Karl Marx was when he wrote Capital. We're not even talking about your study group. We're talking about the real world. So let's be very clear about this. It's going to take a critical mass of people to push back against anyone who occupies political office, certainly the chief executive of the United States of America. So, but why does BB not want her there? Because she'll be a lot more inclined to do it if pushed than will his very good friend who he goes to visit when he's violating the Logan Act. I mean, Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago. So, you know, as we think about these things in this last of our 3 consecutive conversations running for the borders close to the edge, it's not 4 years ago. And yet, the only thing that has changed for the people who oppose our common humanity is the date on the calendar. And they've gotten better at it now. So, you know, the New York Times Magazine had an article. We talked about this in office hours on Sunday night. I won't go look for it. It talks about Peter Thiel. It talks about Elon Musk and 2 other guys, 4 billionaires who spent part or all of their formative years in apartheid South Africa, who are bankrolling Donald John Trump because they see what's in it for them. Jeff Bezos telling the Washington Post, don't endorse. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate you, man. Why? Because it wouldn't have been news if the LA Times and the Washington Post endorsed Kamala Harris. What made news was y'all stopping it. And so, to the tune of now 300,000, as of a couple of days ago, canceled subscription for the Washington Post. They don't put a dent in Jeff Bezos's bank account. Why? Because ain't nobody canceling Amazon Prime. And even if they did, he got other stuff. One of the reasons he's telling them don't endorse her ain't because he's against her or for her. Who knows? But one thing's for sure. His space venture, his blue, whatever it is, space venture, that's competition with Elon Musk SpaceX. And Elon Musk has got all these federal contracts for satellites and the rockets that launch them, contracts for all kinds of things. But he got contracts with the Chinese too. He got contracts with people all over the world. But he wants to buy a government. Jeff Bezos wants to buy a government. And Jeff Bezos ain't willing to go all in with her. And Elon Musk and the people who are in his class are gaming the gambling sites to make it look like a victory is inevitable, which is basically setting it up for all the lawsuits, many of which have been filed already, and more of which will be filed next week. We'll come to that. But I'm bringing this up now because these MAGA billionaires that are outlined in the New York Times Magazine, as we talked about in office hours on Monday night, last Monday night, and it's going to be quite an office hours the day after tomorrow, because obviously the next day is the political warfare called Election Day in the United States of America. So it's going to be very interesting, the conversation we have. But these MAGA billionaires have an agenda that's not for our common humanity. Now, that doesn't mean that in the Democratic camp, you don't have billionaires, you don't have moneyed interests that aren't aligned with ours. You know, all of the reports, and now anytime you see something in a magazine with a well-sourced and well-reported story, like the stories that have been published on Tony West, Maya Harris, Kamala Harris's sister's brother, her brother-in-law, who is by her side all the time, who is apparently one of, if not her chief political advisor in many ways, the senior lawyer for Uber, who helped them devise their strategy to block Uber drivers from unionizing and using collective bargaining as a way to increase them, who stopped them from being able to be listed as employees instead of contractors. You know, Tony West is no friend to the working class, but politically, he is different than than Peter Thiel. He's different than Elon Musk. And news out of Montana, just read this in the paper this morning. Montana has a lottery. They issued 500,000 tickets. 500,000 tickets were sold in 3 hours in the state of Montana. Now, what does that do with the MAGA billionaires and the people in the Democratic Party who have their own moneyed interests and all this kind of thing? The MAGA billionaires and the people who bought $500,000 worth of tickets in 3 hours in Montana, where John Tester is fighting for his political life in the United States Senate. Tester's a Democrat. His opponent is a MAGA clown. You know, they like electing MAGA clowns in the state of Montana. Tester may lose that seat, but Colin Alright could win in Texas and put out Rafael Cruz, and that would cancel that out. Joe Manchin, money-making Joe Manchin, the cosplay coal miner, going to lose his seat to Jim Justice and his dog in West Virginia. And Jim Justice is not going to he don't come to work in West Virginia. He ain't coming to work in D.C. They just need that seat. The Toonie Loon in Arizona is not running for re-election. She's spending your campaign donations on trips around the world, according to reports. And that, of course, would be Kirsten Sinema, Dr. Kirsten Sinema, who wrote her dissertation on Rwandan genocide, interestingly enough. But Ruben Gallego can win that seat against the white passing Kerry Lake in Arizona. So in other words, the United States Senate might be 50-50, and then Coach Walz gets to break the tie, but only if people continue to vote in Texas to join the over half of the people. Shout out to Harris County, Texas, and the Houstonians. Had a couple of students from Howard who went home to vote. They ain't trusted mail. They ain't no, I'm going home. They went home to vote. You drag Colin Howard across the line. Shout out to again Ifabara and Nelly, the conversation we had on Project 2025 a little while ago, which I think was a very extensive conversation we had. Interviewed Beto O'Rourke. I think her show, Rethinking Freedom on Monday, they're going to broadcast that. You can find her out there on YouTube for that side of it. You know, they're in the streets fighting. They ain't just fighting in the blue areas like Harris County. They fighting in them little enclaves. You know, Texas is huge. They fighting in all them little spots that on the map the New York Times will put out will look red. And then when you drill down by county, you'll see a little blue, but you'll see red. But what you won't see is those voters who 2 or 3 here, 15 here, 5 here, 35 over here. Yeah, Jasmine Crockett was in Montgomery, but her base of operations is blue as hell in Texas. But let's be clear, not too far from her, they got ruby red, but it's some people there who will vote another way. There are women in Texas who, I was reading an article in one of the magazines where they were canvassing in what they call the so-called bedroom communities of Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia, Bucks County, and places like that. And they say, knock on the door, here's somebody with a Trump sign. Knock on the door anyway. The husband answers the door. Yeah, we just come. Oh, I'm voting for Trump. And you see the wife. Well, did I speak to your wife? Well, she gonna vote like I vote. And then the door closed. They walking away, and somebody calls from the window. Huh? Their wife. Oh! So when they trot out Aaron Brockovich, I'm sorry, Julia Roberts, to tell these white women, when you go in the booth, nobody knows but you. They know what they doing. You understand? But people like that are not going to show up in a poll. So Tuesday is up for grabs. Oh, the roasted racist club. You ignore everything the commercial mass media. They're going to win either way. And they don't have our interests either. So, but we don't know what's going to happen. But we know that you're going to need not just the presidency. And this is why I was thinking about that Financial Times article for yesterday. And I don't, you see, I started looking for it. It was actually in the, hold on, I might, no, it's not there. I'm not going to find it. But the article was about the billionaires and how they are pressing and who they are backing, but how even that won't be enough because you can't go on these polls. You got to basically call yourself, let me see, because I'm gonna keep looking for it until I find it, but I'm not gonna. There's something else I wanted to quote here on that. But these people can spend as much money as they want, but ultimately the money they spend will be more than neutralized by people participating because they only get one vote. It doesn't matter how much money they have. Oh, I'm not gonna find it, and that's too bad. Oh wait, no, I know, because this one wasn't in the Financial Times. It was in the New York Times yesterday, and maybe this is the article. Oh no, it's Tomorrow Figures. All right, y'all know, because now we down to the thing. I start reading everything. Hold on, this might be it right here. Yeah, this is the one I'm looking for. Billionaires make bets on control. It wasn't Financial Times, the New York Times yesterday. You see that? Billionaires make bets on control. This is from the business section in yesterday's New York Times. There was a piece in here that caught my eye that I wanted to share. Here we go. And of course, there's Jeff Bezos. There's Elon Musk. Billionaires bet to assure lucrative rewards in Washington. Musk and SpaceX versus Bezos and Blue Origin. These are the space companies vying for these billions in contracts, right? But this is what caught my eye. Because remember, and then we're going to turn in a minute to Project 2025. I'll come back to this because remember the 4 pillars of Project 2025. The policy agenda, that's this. The database network that they built with thousands of people who will replace the federal workers once Trump revives the executive order he signed, Schedule 7, near the end of his presidency in 2020 that he didn't get to implement because you stopped him by putting him out of office, violence notwithstanding. And shout out to Kamala Harris. We heard Cassie, who is one of our people from Sirius, talking about she was out there with the 75,000+ people on the Hill at the Ellipse watching Senator Harris. I'm sorry, Vice President Harris. I'm sorry, perhaps President in waiting Harris speak, and basically like spraying a can of Lysol over the place where Donald Trump launched the coup attempt on January 6, 2021. But the article talks about how these billionaires are trying to game this system. And in Project 2025, the first pillar is the policy agenda. The second pillar is a database. We'll talk about the other 2 pillars in a minute. Again, we've talked about it before, so we won't get into it a whole lot today. The second pillar is a database of people who submitted their resumes. They've been vetted because they're ready to go. This ain't 2020. This is 2024. So they what has changed is their agenda hasn't changed, but they got time. They've ramped up what they're going to do. Well, who is helping them to build this computerized database, this virtual database? Oracle. What is Oracle? We know the founder and the bigwig billionaire on top of the Oracle rocket is named Larry Ellison. I saw Larry Ellison one time when I first started working at Howard. He gave some computers to Howard and they had a reception and they were giving him all this credit. I'm like, why are we giving this white man credit for giving us computers that are clearly obsolete to him? Boy, you know, Negroes in it. We got to stop this poor theory stuff. But anyway, I know it was setting it up for another donation that came. Wait, I guess we're still waiting on that. This is the article. It says, even this ocean of money from the billionaires has a limit, however. I'm going to quote what I'm about to read to make the point that none of these people get more than one vote, just like you do, just like I do, just like we do. Here it is. Larry Ellison, the founder of Oracle, who ranks just behind Mr. Musk and Mr. Bezos as one of the richest men in the world, last year backed the presidential aspirations of Senator Tim Scott, a South Carolina Republican. Mr. Ellison spent at least $30 million, but could not make Mr. Scott a viable candidate. Mr. Now this is Larry Ellison, right? So you don't see Elon Musk, oh, Jeff Bezos. Ellison he's 3 behind Musk. He's 3 behind Musk and Bezos in terms of that rank order. And he pumped $30 million in the Mushmouth campaign. Couldn't make him a viable candidate. Why? Because you ain't got but one vote. We'll come back around this in a minute because I'm not going to dwell on Project 2025. I just want to emphasize a couple of things, couple of chapters in there as we kind of begin to wind this up. The Montana lottery, 500,000 tickets sold in 3 hours. What kind of desperation does that signal? John Tester fighting for his political life in Montana. He's done nothing but deliver for the state of Montana, but you got a MAGA clown with millions. He's pumping his own money, trying to buy a Senate seat, running for white supremacy, open MAGA, blah, blah, blah. And people who are so desperate that they would spend their hard-earned money to buy 500,000 tickets in 3 hours. Most of them people are going to pull the lever against somebody who might help them get a little health care or keep a little health care, against somebody that if he gets in and gets a majority in the Senate, combined with a MAGA president, gonna snatch. So you think you spent a lot of money on lottery tickets before this election, after the election, you're gonna spend even more of your money. Well, actually, no, because you won't have any, because when your baby gets sick, you have to come out of pocket if you don't want her to die. I'm not missing words at this point. This is not cuteness. This ain't radical left theory, as Gerald Horne would say, our friends on the left talking about that. And this ain't both sidism or 18-year-olds who've been watching too much damn TikTok, busting up in the booth and pulling the lever for Trump and can't tell you why, but can tell you every song Young Thug ever made. Well, at the same time, this ain't that. This is people saying, those of us who know what to do, including those who are part of that, as Clay Kane says, 90 million, who don't participate, but for this time are going to do something that they haven't done in quite some time, or maybe ever, like the brother who stood in line with me in the dark at Lee Elementary School in West Philadelphia before I got on the train to come to Howard. The brother who stood, as I've told you all before, that morning in 2008, we there to vote. And the brother, I went to the rally the previous day on Monday in North Philly, and all these teenagers, thousands of these teenagers, I don't know if anybody in that whole damn rally could vote, but they was out there because they had remixed Lil Wayne's A Milli and made Obama. I'm like, they done got the whole of North Philly out in the street. This is crazy. And then they went out knocking on doors. The people who we did not fully enable and empower. And because we didn't do it, they didn't do it, because these were young people. I'm not letting them off the hook, but I'm not blaming them either. Because in those 8 years that we weren't in power, we didn't push that dude. Yeah, he gave you some medals, and yes, Stevie Wonder played music at the White House, and yeah, Beyonce sang at the inauguration, and yeah, a lot of black people got their reparations $1 at a time from Obama t-shirts and mugs, but half them Negroes is down on the National Mall right now selling Trump stuff because they don't care who wins. They can move the product, whoever it is. Yeah, but we let them down. When I saw that enthusiasm, it was incredible. And the next morning, I'm out there at 5 a.m. Wow, I'm going to get in line because I know this line going to be long. I need to vote immediately and get on the train to get to D.C. to teach my class. And I'm out there in the middle of the night. I got to that door thinking, okay, it's the middle of the night, but it's cool. I got there thinking I'm going to be number one. I was number 3 because 2 old black women in lawn chairs were sitting at the door to open up the damn polling place at the school. And then as soon as I greeted them, here come this brother behind me. Hey, bro, what's going on? Yeah, we ready. All right. He said, man, I ain't voted since Wilson Goode was the mayor. That was the first black mayor of Philadelphia. I said, hey, man, get in front of me. You can't get in front of these elders, but you get in front of me. I'm number 4. We went in there and voted when the doors opened a couple hours later and got at it. But my point is this. Is that going to be the enthusiasm on Tuesday? Yeah, it's going to be enthusiasm like that in some places for some people, like the sister who called in with us, who met Kamala Harris at the Ellipse on Tuesday, who called and said, serious, and said, hey, I was there. So I got there so hella early, and then I met the vice president. We talked. Like the handful of Howard students who will probably be there, like my niece, Kosi and Nelly, who I guess they picked her to be one of the students who will be able to be there Tuesday, because they're going to have the place on lockdown. Our kids not going to be there, but they got a few, because you can't just rent the whole place, and it would be embarrassing not to have some young black people, some students there from the place that you're renting. So, Kosi will be there, and I'm grateful for that. But this is regular black folk. And so, the same 500,000 who buying lottery tickets and then going to vote against their interests, who are going to vote for somebody who will be in collusion with somebody who will make them even more desperate, and they won't buy 500,000 lottery tickets in Montana in 3 hours. They'll buy them in 3 minutes. And then where does that money go? Let's not even talk about that. They're willing to back a fool over John Tester. And that's a metaphor for what's going on in this country. Your whiteness or your life. A Rovember? Hardly. Maybe. Don't know. If you if you're on the second floor of your house when the canvassers leave, giving a wink and a thumbs up because your allegedly Bible reading, Handmaid's Tale fantasy having husband is said, my wife gonna vote the way I vote. Talking to you. So what are these themes? We're running for the borders. It's too close to the edges. We're running for the borders. The border of Alabama and Georgia. In Georgia, early vote. Over half the people in Georgia done voted already. In Alabama, no. You got to vote on the day. So guess what? Vote on the day. Show up in Alabama. Alabama's at least a third black. As you make the point all the time, Karen, as we've heard many times around this country, if we vote our numbers, then we put the people we want in. Guess what? Jesus Christ, Aretha Franklin, Fannie Lou Hamer is not on the ballot this year. Kamala Harris is. So you got to decide what will advance our interests from our governance logic. Who are we to each other? Who are we to each other? Alpha Phi Alpha, they out there. Former president, we talked to him on the radio. They got a little pack. We talked yesterday to Derek Johnson. Do I agree with everything Derek Johnson says? No. I like Derek Johnson. I have some disagreements with him when it comes to how celebrities are leveraged, but I understand and I respect Derek Johnson for this proposition above anything else. He said, you ain't got to like the NAACP. You ain't got to join the NAACP. He said, I believe in us coming together in common interest. I respect that. And they busting their ass. So if you need a ride to the polls, NAACP got that set up, go to their website. If you see something on that the poll, as you say yesterday, Karen, you and Roy talking, you know, if something going funny, they got a number, call NAACP website. Hey, I got to report this because they got an army of lawyers on the other side. And that is what we have to do to protect something that they have been working hard to get rid of. It's time to focus. 3 days, friends. Lawyers are already challenging and lining up. Pre-November 5th, pre this Tuesday, there was something passed called the Help America Vote Act 30 years ago. 31, I guess, technically, 1993. There are at least 19 cases that have already been filed prior to Tuesday with support of the Republican Party apparatus. You know, Trump took over the Republican Party, put his daughter-in-law in charge of the state of the apparatus. At least 2 of them lawsuits in Arizona, lawsuit in Nevada, which are backed by the Republican National Committee. What is their argument? They're saying that states are in violation of the Help America Vote Act. They are claiming, we've looked at these rolls and there are more voters than there are citizens in this state. So what they're claiming is fraud and registration. And they're trying to combat what we've talked about a million times, all of us everywhere, about this illusion of voter fraud. Non-citizens are voting. They went to get a driver's license and they signed them up to vote and they voted. That's a lie. It is a lie. And the field general for this, one of the field generals, is a dude named Hans von Spakovsky. Hans von Spakovsky. We'll come back to von Spakovsky in a minute because he wrote chapter 29 in this Project 2025 document, which is where I'm going to come in for a landing. The SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, put its thumb on the scale in Virginia for the white nationalist governor of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin, who they threw off 1,600 people off the roll in Virginia because the Supreme Court of the United States refused to take the case and hear the appeal of a lower court decision that, the Supreme Court refused to enjoin the state of Virginia from purging these people from the rolls under the illusion, under the imaginary threat of voter fraud. You see? Yes, come on in. Right. We good? Okay, cool. Just want to make sure. All right. The Supreme Court refused to do it. 3 people said they would have granted the injunction. You can imagine who that is. Ketanji and Yuka Brown Jackson. Shout out to Justice Brown Jackson, who was on the campus of Howard University School of Law 2 Wednesdays ago with the dean of the current School of Law, Start calling him Justin. Roger's Fairfax brother, the Fairfax brothers. Okay. uh, the Fairfax brothers, of course, we know Justin Fairfax, who should have been the governor of Virginia, still can't get any traction from anybody. He was accused of sexual assault. He talked about the context in which he did, in fact, have sex with one of the sisters, and how it wasn't sexual assault. He tried to get prosecutors in the state of Massachusetts and in the state of North Carolina, black women, to, incidentally, by the way, I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying that for whatever reasons, they would not pursue the cases, try to clear his name. And then very quietly, the stuff starts going away. The Washington Post backs up and says, sorry, we shouldn't have. Sorry. He should have been the governor of Virginia. You got kneecap. His brother's the dean of law school at Howard. And before that, he was at American University. And they are friends of Ketanji Brown Jackson. They went to school together. His wife's very close. And they had a panel. Ketanji Brown Jackson, before she spoke at Howard Law School, several of the sisters who went to school with her talked about their time as undergraduates and in law school. And so it's very, very, very powerful moment by all accounts. But Ketanji Brown Jackson, Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson, Elena Kagan, and of course Justice Sonia Sotomayor would have granted the injunction stopping Virginia from purging those rolls. The lawsuits have already been filed. Now, yesterday the news comes down that in Pennsylvania, where they tried to sequester votes and do the same thing, the Supreme Court would not stop that one. So I'm like, okay, this is interesting where we're going with this. In other words, the lawsuits are already being filed. The question that we have to ask ourselves is, do we want to do what we can do to forestall the kind of political violence and confrontation that will come with a Trump presidency? You know, it's very interesting. On on Thursday, we aired a conversation on SiriusXM Urban View Mornings with this guy, Jason Stanley. Jason Stanley is a professor at Yale University. He's written a book called Erasing History: How Fascists Rewrite the Past to Control the Future. Very interesting because he gave a nice definition. He's the Jacob Yukowski Press Professor. I don't know how they make the decision on how they take the photo jackets, but you know, the hand on the chin. Okay, if y'all see me as a hand on the chin, find whoever took that picture and be like, that wasn't him. That was a body double. So we need the address because we got to take that guy and hide him somewhere till we find the real Greg Carr. Because if I took a picture like this, anyway, I'm saying, I know people do, but I'm just saying. But this guy, Jason Stanley, Professor Stanley, is an interesting guy. And we had a good conversation about that, how fascism works, what it is, how it works. And we talked about fascism last week. I'm not going to get into it. But we have to remember that we have to make a choice now. Are we going to stand in the way of a system that has no compunction? And I'm not going to go through what we talked about. I encourage you all, go back and listen to that conversation. It was a long conversation and it was a good conversation. And it talked about how everything from the Nazis looking at how Black people were treated in the United States to kind of move their thing forward, the laws that they put in place in Germany, and them backing away from some of the things that were done in terms of race law and apartheid in the United States, saying that's too harsh. The Nazis saying that's too harsh. We're not going to do that. What y'all do to Black people. Wow, really? So anybody who thinks it's beyond the pale to think that Donald Trump is going to turn the guns of the federal government against Black people, and I don't mean just Black people who came here from other countries, who are also part of the wave of immigrants from Africa or the Caribbean or anywhere else in the world. I'm talking about anybody Black. Then you don't know American history. You certainly don't know that bubblehead kid who came out of a Jewish family whose self-hatred is so deep that it vomits out of his mouth every time he opens. And that would be one of the hate rally and Madison Square Garden's key speakers. That would be, of course, Stephen Miller. Then you don't understand what we're looking at. So the question is, do we want to win enough of more time to put our best opponent in the White House to then push her and the entire government in the direction we want to go, or do we just want the beef? There are people who want the beef. Yesterday, I was listening to Amari Yeshela. Amari Yeshela is one of the brothers, the leader of the Uhuru movement, so-called Uhuru 3, who was convicted of a federal jury of colluding with the Russians and being agent of a foreign power. That's a lie. Amari Shuttle have been on the wall for years. There's a Black People's March to the White House today in D.C. I might go down there just to see what's going on. But I saw them yesterday. They had a press conference in Northwest D.C. across the street from Howard. And they were talking about, he said, and he said something very poignant, I thought, because we talked about this with Jason. Jason Stanley writes in this book about how fascism, the whole stuff that we talked about before, 1930s, the 19-teens, 1920s, the rise of Mussolini in Italy, the Fasci, which is the party in Italy where we get the word fascism from. Then, of course, the rise of the Nazis, the National Socialists, and Adolf Hitler. The fact that in that type of attempt to take over the apparatus of an elected government, you don't need a majority of people in the country. You just need a third of half plus one. In other words, the Nazi party became the heart of the party that won 51% of the election. And in that party, about a third of them were the hardcore racists. But once you take over the federal apparatus, you can then make it work. That's the same thing here. They don't need a majority. All these damn polls. Oh, it's a title. Shut the hell up. Electoral college is ensured that you don't need a majority. And what the white nationalists now understand is they can't stop time. They can't stop demographics. So their play now is to set up permanent white minority rule, which is why he also talks about South Africa. But in the conversation, I reminded him as we were talking that rally in 1939 that Donald Trump's father helped organize, the Bund, the German Bund, the people who were pro-Nazis out here in the United States, when they helped organize that hate rally in 1939, this pro-Hitler rally. They had a big picture of George Washington, as we talked about last week, because it was his 207th birthday. They used that as an excuse. And they said George Washington was the original fascist. The original fascist. Now I'm going to pause here and say I agree. Except I disagree that he's the original fascist. We might go back to Christopher Columbus. We might go back to the people in the Crusades. We might go back to Charlemagne, not the God. I'm talking about the real Charlemagne. But my point is this. George Washington was a fascist. Of course he was a fascist. Why? Because as Amari Yeshella was reminding everybody yesterday, I'm sitting there listening. I'm just listening to these cats, these elders at this point, who have gone through the Black Power movement, who came through the COINTELPRO movement, who came through, who were prosecuted in a federal court for colluding with Russians because they took a trip to Russia, and somehow Jill Stein still walks free. I was listening. Mike Flynn still walks free. Steve Bannon out of jail. I was listening to him talk, and he said, they're all fascists. People say, oh my God, here we go. But let's think about it. He says, you really going to lecture Black people about fascism? A word. Yes. Who are you? Well, I'm the Negro who was descended from the Negro who was descended from a Negro who was a captive, who was descended from a Negro who was captive, who was descended from a Negro who was captive, who was descended from a Negro who was not a captive, who was descended from the origin of humanity to that Negro that just got captured the other day. And the one that was captured worked in Mount Vernon. And if you went back in time to the 18th century, and asked them Black people who George Washington had captive at Mount Vernon whether George Washington was a fascist, once you explain it to them, don't you think they would say he's a fascist? I'll save you the thinking. Yes, of course they would. We've been facing fascism since somebody snatched our asses. So we know what fascism is. And if you want to get lured into some more theoretical debates and arguments about, I think there's nobody except our blood kin. By the way, happy Native American Month started November the 1st, yesterday. We are also in the corridor, since this is All Saints, All Day Saints Day was yesterday. This is the corridor for the Day of the Dead. I'm sure the Museum of the American Indian will be having something. I may go down and take a trip down there too to see what's going on down there. I love going to the Museum of the American Indian. But there's nobody in the United States of America who better understands than indigenous people and the Africans what a fascist is. That's why we're having this conversation in English, friends. That's why we even got to worry about passports and state IDs and all that shit, because the expansion of the concept, which is what we've been talking about in the social structure category for the last several weeks in Nubia in office hours, which is why we read that first chapter of John Ma's book, Polis, on the origins of this concept, which is why we read in Kemp's book on ancient Egypt, the fact the Egyptians didn't have a concept of citizenship, where you see this notion of the palace and citizenship through Greece, then Rome, and then forward to today. What you see is a construct that is set up to exclude. And once you set up those barriers to formally exclude, you are setting up other barriers, other borders that people will then try to occupy for their political power. They will run for the borders. And political power is often a proxy for economic power in a capitalist society. So as we're talking about this, as Muriel Bowser said, George Washington was a fascist. I can go down the street with you on that. I would agree with you, make America again, people, except you want to be a fascist and you think that you, just like the Confederacy was doing, when them black people filled the streets in the summer of 2020 and pulled them statues down and forced the Richmond City Council to take them statues down on Monument Row in Richmond, when black people understood that Stonewall Jackson is a fascist. Robert E. Lee is a fascist. Ulysses S. Grant was on the side of the angels, and we meaning black people, turned the Civil War into a war of liberation against fascism, as we had experienced it since the first person put their hands on us and brought us into this mess. And Abraham Lincoln, to quote my man whose birthday was last week, the great Lerone Bennett Jr., was forced into glory. Nobody give a damn. He wanted to preserve the Union. People get so obsessed with preserving the Union, they will look aside at fascism. And guess what? Lincoln was ready to make that deal. He wasn't ready to make the deal to allow the Confederacy to leave, but he was willing to make the deal to keep us captive if it meant they stayed. So don't start talking to black people about fascism, because that is the reason we are in this funky ass mess. Every line on the world map is a result of global fascism. Every line on the map of Africa is a result of fascism against Africa. White minority rule every country in the Caribbean. There's no Jamaica or Haiti. There's no Dominican Republic or Cuba. There's no Belize. There's no Mexico. They took the top 2/3 of it off. Fascism. You don't want to talk to non-white people about fascism. We know it when we see it. The question is, are we going to know it when we see it enough on Tuesday? Oh, come on. Muriel Bowser said that and something clicked for me. It makes perfect sense. We got to think about that now. Who's going to be our allies? You got a white one upstairs giving a thumbs up and the wink. Okay, we think we know how you're going to vote, but let's talk about fascism in the context as we kind of end this up. The greatest movement in this country in terms of racial and gender demographic won't be black men. Won't be those brothers who have been so vilified that Kamala Harris got to go to North Philly and sit in a barbershop with them in the last minute and have a conversation I thought was very moving in many ways, very personal, also policy chop. But people ain't listening to that. They listen to fools, They listened to, 4 years ago, it was our brother O'Shea Jackson with his policy document that he took to Democrats and the Republicans, and Democrats didn't meet. So therefore, let me go to the Republicans. And so O'Shea Jackson, better known as Ice Cube, who performed the Don of LA at the World Series when California beat New York and Joe Crack got booed in the Bronx. But Ice Cube got a lot of love, including the manager of the Dodgers, the brother. Congratulations, Dave Roberts, black man, manager of the Dodgers, who apparently was next to Ice Cube at the parade yesterday, rapping word for word as Ice Cube rapped. Okay, today was a good day, but that ain't what one I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about we be clubbing. Yay, yay. You can do it. Put your back into it. You can do it. Put your, yeah, That's what I'm talking about, the ignorant stuff. They will have somebody say, I'm picking Trump because he's a man's man. You done lost your damn mind. And really, Puerto Ricans and Latinos, it really took a direct insult and calling y'all garbage for you to decide you was going to jump in something that you should have been in all along. I think you should recognize fascism when you see it. Why? Because you're in a colony. You can't even vote for president. They'll have a beauty contest on Tuesday, but it don't count. And you ain't got no representatives. The bottom line is this. As we're thinking about the demographics, that should be lining up, all this obsession with these black men who are just behind black women in terms of the number of people that are going to vote. The biggest things we talked about last week, as we kind of begin to wind up, the biggest thing in the last week was the emphasis on white women. Are a majority of white women going to vote for Donald Trump? Probably. But will that majority be big enough? Maybe not. Talking to white women now who are watching this. White women, they're projecting anywhere from 51, 52%, which will be lower than the number that voted for Trump last time, lower than the number that voted the time before. 3 times this clown has run, 16, 20, and now 2024. that should be enough for us to be able to recognize this fool. At this point, his brain is gone. It leaked out of his ears over the arc of the last 6 months to a year, and now it's completely gone. He just out here. Roland Martin, after he left TV One, he started his network, Black Star Network, the first show, still the flagship show, Roland Martin Unfiltered. We're watching Donald Trump Unfiltered. Donald Trump out here just like, blah, 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 blah. I mean, to the point where he can't get any worse. I kind of feel like Keith Olbermann, who has a daily podcast he does, which I think is very interesting to listen to Keith Olbermann, whatever else his challenges are or not, his feet cracking jokes. And one of the things he says is, what's the over under on between now and Tuesday? He going to use the N word. But guess what? If he used the N word, you think he loses votes? We know what fascism looks like. They use the N word every day. They got euphemisms. For him to use it now wouldn't even be, he can't break it. But I'm saying that, will there be enough white women who vote against him, who either stay at home or vote to protect their rights? Well, I'm sorry, they don't have any rights. And this brings me to the point I want to raise. This morning, about 5 a.m., my now colleague and friend, Nicole Hannah-Jones, published an article, which I think will probably be in tomorrow's Sunday New York Times Magazine. It's certainly posted on the website now, where she talks about white women. As I read it, I sent it to Valethia Watkins, in case she hadn't already seen it, because she don't sleep. And I was like, Valethia, Nicole is basically channeling you. Valethia Watkins has been talking and writing about this for 30 years. And that is the fact that there ain't never been Nicole is tempering hers. I understand why she has to do it. Valethia just goes straight, no chaser. There ain't never been no coalition between white women and black women. So the idea of using women as a demographic, and they say, well, the majority of women voted for Joe Biden last year. Yeah, that's because you counting black women in with white women. Let's just take the white women out. Oh, no, they haven't voted for a Democrat, says Bill Clinton. Right. White women not voting in majority. And so she goes through the history. But I would encourage and invite everybody, listen to Valethia Watkins on this, because she writes right through it. I mean, when white women got together for their Seneca Falls meeting, they didn't invite black women. The only black person there was Fred Douglass. And you know how that is when you get around white women who like black men. But the point is this, it was only one even, and that was Fred Douglass. Fred, we want you to come. What about the black women? This is a women's meeting, right? Yeah, but not y'all in words. Oh, remember Sojourner Truth have to say, ain't I a woman? Aren't I a woman? As she would have said in her New York Dutch. Well, when black women get together in 1974 with the Combahee River Collective and then issue their statement in 1977 about, how black women coming together, Combahee River, of course, the low country of South Carolina. Shout out to all my people in South Carolina, Brother Bernie, a faithful Nubian, and also in here, Cat Adams, of course, all the people down there, Brother Derek, Brother Jerome, all the folks there in South Carolina around the Kemetic Institute of South Carolina and the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations. Looking forward to seeing you all. I'll be going down to Claflin at some point, either later this month or December. But, when these black women use the name of Combahee or Combee, as Etta Fields writes in her book Combee that you see up there, Combahee, you can't see it, but it's up there, on Harriet Tubman and that war to end the oppression, where 750,000 Africans are released from captivity and fight their way out of captivity, led by the woman that John Brown called the General, Harriet Ross Tubman, or in her governance formation rendering who she was to her people. She had an Akan name, an African name. And when Harriet Ross Tubman led those women, it was Combahee River that they fought in and fought around. So that's the black women use that. But you start talking about the black women, they understood. They understood that they were not part of this white woman coalition. And that goes back to the fight for the 14th Amendment. So I want to just talk about this for a minute. Of the 15th Amendment, rather. The 15th Amendment of the United States Constitution. And I just pulled out one of my, I got a lot of these constitutions. I stick one in my bag every time I go over to teach my class at the law school, because it's always nice to have here's the 15th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Think about this in the context of the right to vote. Section 1, the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state or on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Section 2, Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Gender is not mentioned in here. Women were voting, as Valethia often reminds us, in places like New York State and other places. There is no federal prohibition on women voting written into the 15th Amendment. But because it didn't mention it, they excluded these black men. I'm sorry, black men? Was it black men? No, it was white men excluded. But here's the interesting thing. How could they even pass a 15th Amendment? The radical Republicans in the Congress, and before the people who were Republicans, see, it was the Republicans, ain't the same party, friends. The white nationalist party of today is not the Republican Party of the 19th century. And we talked about that before. We're not going to talk about it again. The reason they were able to get the 15th Amendment passed is because of the 14th. The 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, the Due Process and Equal Protection Amendment to the United States Constitution, the Citizenship Amendment to the United States Constitution opened up the possibility, along with the military in the South, divided into 5 military districts, opened up the possibility for black men to vote. These Army veterans, these formerly captive Africans, enough of them participated in the political process to put the radical Republicans over the top in the federal legislature so they could pass the 15th Amendment. And guess what? Black women secured the right to vote with the 15th Amendment. No, they didn't. As Valethia always, teaches us and writes about this, white women abandoned black women. In fact, they moved against black women. In fact, Susan B. Anthony and them are like, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and them are like, why would you give the vote to Sambo, meaning black men, before your wives and daughters? Can we come together on this and form like Voltron? There have been moments when white women have broken from white men. Hopefully Tuesday will be one. Hopefully many of the 70 million votes that are seen as registered Republican, it reflect white women that went in the booth and voted the way they wanted, not the way their husband told them to vote. But what history teaches us is we can't count on that. When we vote our numbers, we win. So when we think about even the 15th Amendment, when black women got the right to vote, Valethia always says when black men did, because they had to pass enabling legislation pursuant to Section 2 of the 15th Amendment, and that was the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And guess what? The war that Project 2025 envisions, the war that has been in place since the 1960s and the passage of the Voting Rights Act has been to roll back that enabling legislation of the 1960s, which goes back, as Lerone Bennett always reminded us, to the 1860s when we were 8 years in power. The last time this country came anywhere close to being what we often say that it should be was the 1860s and then the 1960s, and they've been fighting since the 1960s to roll it back. That's what every subsequent mandate for leadership every 4 years has been about. That was the Powell Amendment of 71, the Heritage Foundation of 73, the first mandate for leadership in 1981, the Federalist Society, now funded and run over by, managed by Leo Little and all of his cretins and all their people. Harlan Crow, who got a signed copy of Mein Kampf at his house and owns Clarence Thomas, lock, stock, barrel, Mama's house, and everything. They've been fighting to roll it back. Elon Musk, who's going to Mars, y'all can be damned. Jeff Bezos, who wants those contracts, so nobody going to endorse nobody. I'm just trying to make sure in case Trump wins. They on one side, but they all only get one vote. And so putting those judges in that Trump will put in, this is the strategy. They know they can't do no more. Well, they'll probably continue to try to do more. If they get more judges, yeah, they got enough now to kick the rest of the teeth out of the 15th Amendment. But do you dare say nobody can vote? Now, you can't really do that because you might finally piss off enough people, which is what some of the people who say voting for Trump will do, lead to the confrontation. I'm not saying theoretically it might not be true. I'm saying that I'm more concerned about those people who you're going to put in harm's way before your ass is in harm's way. It's mighty selfish of you. So, but the point is this. They've been using the First Amendment, freedom of association. You see, that's Citizens United, freeing up the money in 2010. That's Dobbs. That's Students for Fair Admission, the affirmative action case. That's the evasions. I ain't baking no cakes for homosexuals. I'm not setting up no websites for 303 Creative in Colorado, Hobby Lobby. They forum shop for a federal judge, get their case, even if it's overturned, they get a Supreme Court, and they've been using the First Amendment, freedom of speech and expression, freedom of association, to codify their intolerance, codify their white supremacist intolerance, run usually through the rubric of white Christian nationalism. They got rid of a woman's right to choose by saying it's not explicit in the Constitution. It's considered a penumbra, a shadow of rights under the First Amendment, the 15th Amendment, the 14th Amendment. Well, there is no right to privacy. They are using the First Amendment as a battering ram. Yeah, I'm an asshole. Yeah, I use the N-word. Yeah, I'm a white supremacist. Yeah, I think women should be barefoot and pregnant and cooking my dinner. And damn it, it's my political right and it's protected speech. And this billionaire believes like I believe, this apartheid billionaire, all four of them who grew up around apartheid and in apartheid in South Africa, they gonna fund me. You can't stop me. And finally, Project 2025. We've been through it, so I'm not gonna go through it again. The four pillars, the policy agenda right here, the database, which is being built in part by Oracle, funded by Larry, by the organization Larry Ellison started. That's who's helping them build it. Shout out to Tim Scott, Senator Scott, who's now running for president. And no, I'm sorry, didn't work. Sorry. The third pillar is the Presidential Academy, where they're going to have a boot camp for these people they've trained, they're training to take over if Trump wins. And the fourth is the 6-month playbook. That's when they run to Boston on us and people say, I thought both parties were the same until Trump won. And now I'm scared for my life. That's okay. You know how to shoot, right? You ready? You ready? Are you ready? 5 sections. As we talked about, section 1, taking the reins of government, 3 chapters. Section 2, the common defense, 6 chapters. Section 3, the general welfare, the longest one, 11 chapters. We've talked about all this before, so I'm just going to get to the point. And the 5th and final section, this is the section I want to end on. The section called Independent Regulatory Agencies. This is the one that talks about financial regulatory agencies like the Securities and Exchange Commission, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, you won't have any, and the Federal Communications Commission. And finally, there are 30 chapters. The 30th is the Federal Trade Commission. But I want to stop for a minute on chapter 29. Hans A. von Spakovsky. Hans Spakovsky, the election denier. Hans Spakovsky, the illegal people are voting. He's in the papers today being quoted. He says the reason that you don't have these prosecutions tallied is because people don't prosecute it. Oh, you're just making shit up. But this is how they're hoping next week to shave off voters, purge voters, remove them from the rolls. The lawsuits, then the second wave of the lawsuits will challenge how the votes are being counted. This is the people that Roy and Karen were talking about on the radio yesterday when they're saying they're showing up, beating at the doors while people in there trying to count. These are the people that are trying to count, who were trying to count in 2020, which is why Shay Moss and her mama got Rudy Giuliani's baseball rings and everything now. But that ain't even going to be enough. Why he's bankrupt now. And his daughter on TV talking about, I don't know why my daddy would do that. Well, the lawsuits are going to be coming, but this ain't 2020, it's 2024. Hans von Spakovsky, who is one of the people who promoted this in at the height of it, he might be running in chapter 29, the entity he critiques, and his chapter is on the Federal Election Commission. His argument in this 8-page chapter, beginning on page 861, it's quite simple, and it offers us a preview into what Trump has been saying the last month on the election trail, which he said one time explicitly, and they ran it for a couple of days and then displaced it with whatever else comes out in the cesspool. And that is the argument that if you vote for me this time, you ain't gonna have to worry about voting again. He didn't say worry about, you ain't gonna have to vote again. This is what von Spakovsky writes on page, let me go again. Come on, son. Section 5, independent regulatory agencies. And I'm gonna tell you, this is the last section. This is fascinating to me. Chapter 29. It's because it's almost at the end. Page 861 of a 922-page document. You see where that is? This is where we're gonna start. This page over here. See where that fits though. At the very end. So you didn't read all them 922 pages. I almost would take offense, but I don't, because it's always new people. So, you know, for the people who've been here for the 4.5 years, we've been doing this consecutively now, and we're in session 243. And you know, that's what people from the 60s say, I love you. Anyway, no, they say 143. One is I love you. But anyway, so 243. Hans von Spakovsky's Federal Election Commission. That's chapter 29. Short chapter. He says the Federal Election Commission, FEC, is an independent federal agency that began operations in 1975 to enforce the Federal Election Campaign Act, FICA, passed by Congress in 1971 and amended in 1974. 1971 is when they wrote the Powell Amendment, in which he said we need a think tank. We got a think tank now, a Narrative in Nubia. If you're not in it, you should come join, because that is a more concentrated form where we're doing some collective work, some collective thinking that can give birth to the dreams and visions of everybody as we come in and share ideas and talk. Make sure you make office hours on Monday night. It's going to be a hot time in the old town, as Malcolm X might say. But they did the Heritage Foundation. We don't have billionaires. We got numbers. See, numbers replace billionaires. So when you have everybody doing a little, nobody has to do a lot. We're here on Saturdays because there are going to be people who can't afford yet to come into Nubia, or who might not have an interest, who are going to come in and sample. We understand that, as we said on Wednesday with Brother Paris out of New Jersey, living in New Jersey in the rehab place. Had a stroke, couldn't afford it, but he's still here now. It's good to see you, brother. We know that. But in that place, we got numbers that will fuel resources, that will fuel our capacity to do a world of things. So much in store for 2025. So much coming up. Oh, we got a project 2025. Don't play. And it's not dissuaded. Doesn't matter if Kamala Harris wins or if Donald Trump wins. But next week, we get to talk about, all next week, and then the Saturday from now, inshallah, as the Muslims would say, what do we do next? Because it'll be clear which direction we need to have, that on top of the permanent direction, which is always liberation. But how do it free us? Page 861. So we know what the FEC is. We know what the enabling legislation is. It says FICA governs the raising and spending of all funds in federal campaigns for Congress and the presidency. The FEC has no authority over the administration of federal elections, which is performed by state governments, which is why they're doing the lawsuits at the state level. The federal government does not run state elections unless you're talking about the Supreme Court in Bush versus Gore, previewing perhaps what will happen next week. Remember, in Bush versus Gore, it is the state of Florida who is doing the recounts because it's too close and it triggers a recount. And Gore and them call for a recount. Bush don't want no recount, because every time they identify the ballots and make clear intent, because you got a lawyer for one side, a lawyer for another side, the person trying to count the ballot and determine what a hanging chad is, what a dimpler is, what a dimpling chad is, what a butterfly vote is. Remember that conversation? Some of us who remember 2020, 2000. Three of those lawyers, Amy Coney Barrett, Beer Kavanaugh, John Boy Roberts, are now on the Supreme Court of the United States. If you don't think actual elections don't matter, go back to Bush versus Gore. When they fighting over ballot, that's a state thing. Why did the Supreme Court hear the case, and then in Bush versus Gore, as they ruled, said you can't use this case for precedent, or don't use it for precedent? Clarence Thomas uses it for precedent. Oh, understand. Von Smakowski said this is a purview of the state. So he says, why do I want to write the chapter on the Federal Election Commission? He says, because right now the Federal Election Commission has 6 members. 3 of one, no party can have more than 3. This is what he says. He says, the president's most significant power is the appointment of 6 commissioners who govern the FEC, subject to confirmation by the U.S. Senate. Commissioners may only serve a single term of 6 years, but because they stay in office until a new commissioner has been confirmed, many commissioners continue to serve past their terms. Under FICA, no more than 3 commissioners may be from the same party. Watch this line. He says, while that means that a commissioner could be an independent or a member of a libertarian or green party in practice, this has meant that the FEC has always had 3 Democrat and 3 Republican commissioners. So in other words, it don't have to be 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans. You can have people from different parties. You would have to think differently. Green Party, PSL, all these other parties, Reform Party, you want to build party? I'm for you. I'll join it. I agree. Let's disagree about things, agree on other things. You build that between election cycles. And if you build enough strength, then maybe you can get some people elected to Congress. Jill Stein, run for Congress again. You ain't want to do that because you're just waiting. I guess I'll be back in 2028 to fuck around in that one. Anyway, the point is this. Party building is independent from electoral politics. It can be. It should be. One of the things we'll probably do next week at Sankofa, one night, maybe Monday night. Or not, well, I won't be there. I'll be an officer. That's what I told him yesterday. Maybe Monday afternoon we'll play Nation Time, about the 1972 black political. In fact, we should have maybe we should do a Nubia and refill with Nation Time on Monday. Anyway, think about this. Anyway, the point is this. He says several things. Here's what he said. The president assuming office in 2025 must ensure if the 3 Republican commissioners do not wish to remain on the FEC past their terms, that nominees for these positions share the views of those commissioners. So in other words, solidify your hardcore MAGA right on the FEC. He says also, to the extent that the president has the ability to negotiate with the Democratic Party in the Senate, he should try to temper any choice of the opposition party to ensure that this individual does not have extreme views on aggressive over-enforcement that would severely restrict political speech and protected party campaign and associational activities. This is the key. So let's say Harris wins and she doesn't get the Senate and she nominates people for the FEC. Got to have 3 Democrats for her, which means it's going to be a 3-3 thing. Guess what? A Republican Senate, it won't be the feckless ghoul. It might be young Josh Hawley, that chinless bastard out of Louisiana. First thing to fall is cats with no chin, to quote Black Thought from the Roots. He's in a war for re-election in Missouri. If you're in Missouri, you need to get out there and vote. There's a Democrat running for him, an ex-Marine that can beat Josh Hawley. Ignore the polls. Vote our numbers. We win. There's a lot of stuff going on like that. Ranked choice voting in D.C. We talked about every caller that called up on Sirius. We asking, what are the down ballot issues that you need to pay attention to? All kind of ranked choice, all kind of ballot issues. But anyway, the point is this. Von Spakowski wants the FEC not to interfere, because they can't interfere with elections, but what they can do is say, you've overstepped your boundaries in terms of speech. You've overstepped your boundaries in terms of expenditures on campaigns. He wants the campaign finance limit raised, the contribution limit raised. He wants the FEC to, he says the president should vigorously oppose all efforts as proposed, for example, in section 6002 of the For the People Act of 2021. Remember the John Lewis Voting Act? Remember the For the People Act? Remember the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act? Democrats ain't done nothing. Did you get enough people in the legislature to get past Manchin and Sinema? And the people hiding behind them? Yeah, you don't think we see you, do you, other people? We see you, which is why you got to deliver a full Senate. Van Spakowski says, the president should oppose any attempts to change the structure of the FEC. Also, you should raise contribution limits and index reporting requirements to inflation. And that's where I'm going to stop, because the key to the FEC is to take all the remaining chains off of possibilities of limiting campaign donations. Remember, how do you break the back of the 15th Amendment when you're not finished doing it directly? You break the back of the 14th Amendment. And how do you break the back of the 14th Amendment? You use the First Amendment like a cudgel. I have a right to be racist. I have a right to be sexist. I have a right to spend $111 billion, like we're going to see between now and Tuesday, to put enough propaganda out there that make you either turn it off and not participate, or think you voting for one thing when you're voting for against another thing. That little chapter, that little 9-page chapter in 2025 will tell you Trump gets the legislature he wants, taking all the rules off, and you ain't got to worry about voting again, because we're going to make sure the federal apparatus is against you and not for you.
And didn't he say that?
He did say it.
You don't have to. I mean, everything is out there.
Everything.
And I said, when they put it in a manifesto that you can download, knowing that you won't read it,
right?
They're already doing it. So Texas is a version of a state that is ruled in an apartheid way. Florida, they've already implemented Project 2025.
Yes.
Now they want to do it federally. So
that's right. Which is our court of last resort, as Ralph Bunche said. The Negro is a special ward of the federal government, particularly the Supreme Court.
And we have to have a list of things. I think I've been thinking about attacking Citizens United.
Yes, absolutely. That's near the top of the list, maybe at the top. That's right.
We have to take the money out.
That's
so
right.
That there truly is one person, one vote, not one billionaire.
That's exactly
vote,
right. That's exactly.
And then we got to look at the Electoral College, which means we have to also send people to Congress asking that question: will you vote to overturn Citizens United, and will you vote to remove the Electoral College so there is one person, one vote? We have to know what the hell we're doing.
Well, also, as Robert Rubin, not Bob Rubin, who's the little guy who was the secretary?
Robert Reich.
Robert Reich. Thank you, Robert. I'm tripping. My mind is
Reich or Reich.
Yes, yes. He does a nice little video on this movement because until we can root out the Electoral College, there is the multi-state pact agreement. And so far, I think there may be close to 2/3 of the number of states that if they agree that whoever wins the national election in terms of the true vote, they will award their electoral votes for that person. Once that number reaches 270, you can neutralize. Because what that means is that regardless of who wins the Electoral College, if whoever wins the majority vote, they've agreed in New York, they've agreed in New Jersey, they've agreed in Massachusetts, they've agreed that whoever wins the majority vote, that's who we give all our electoral votes to. That's a way to get around, and they're close enough with demographics that could happen that could happen quickly.
Yes. You know, but it can't happen if we are obtuse, if we are so stuck in thinking that the pathway to liberation is by a third party at this point. And all you third party people, get busy on Wednesday.
No question.
Forming your third party. Like making your third party valid and viable. That's when you do that. Not
no question.
2 weeks before the election.
No question. Well, everybody who I should mention this because look, I found it. Of
course
there's my sticker.
Of course you did. Let's see.
Oh yeah, there it is. I voted. Your vote there. But I will never wear this. I'm touching, and I touch it. No, I didn't touch it. Good. That's very good. I take it and say thank you. You gonna put it on? Don't play with me. I got a stack of these things.
Plus, it messes up the fabric for some. And
I like to have it. I like to have it. But the other thing I was going to mention, and I mentioned this in office hours, and I'm not going to. I just want to mention it because there are people who, and this is what I was saying. We were talking earlier. I went because Roland ended early on Thursday, so because they were out there in Milwaukee. I think Clinton was speaking, and he went. So I went. I said, "This is my little window before I write this quiz for my students Friday morning." I went down the street to go to the movies because I wanted to see this movie Conclave, which I strongly recommend.
What made you want to see this movie about the selection of the Pope and all of the shenanigans behind? What inspired you?
I saw the trailer, and it was a lot of talking. That's what gets me. I don't want the explosions and shit. Y'all go watch that when I don't need to think about nothing. I'm cleaning up the house. I'm looking for a book. Boom, boom, boom. But it was speech. I'm like, okay, and I like Fiennes.
Ray Fine.
Fine. Thank you for I always do. I like his work. And it's the Catholic Church, which of course we know, and those of you who are Catholic know, is increasingly non-white. And the whole thing is built on Kemetic iconography. And so I want to see what they're going to do.
Say more about that. What you mean the whole thing?
I mean, when everybody here who has been to Kemet and the folks who will go with us next August, we're going to go into many places. Kamambo, the temple for Isis at Philae. We're going to go to all these temples, and when you go, you're going to see immediately. We go to the temple of Isis. You go in the back, in the last chamber, straight back through with the double. These are the models of the cathedrals. This is where the Greeks got it from. But not only that, that's the origin of the European church, the Catholic Church. Their cathedrals are based on that. And when you go in the back, they got an altar. That's the altar that's in every church in the world. That is the Catholic Church foundation. The whole architecture of that. And also, in terms of ways of knowing, the structure. So when you see Mary, Holy Mary, Mother of God, who is the Mother of God? Well, that will be Isis. The Greeks called her Isis, Aset. When you see the origins. And so Catholicism always fascinates me in part because so much of what it does, the hat on the Pope got that crown. Go look at the double crown of the Pharaoh of ancient Egypt. The one that looks like a bowling pin and the one that looks like the champagne bucket it sits in, to use the language that Brother Baba Farouk used to use, the Nubian guy. You always say that bowling pin and that bucket is on his head when he is in the Cathedral of St. Peter, the Pope of Rome, the Pope of the Catholic Church. The vestments, the crook and the flail. Where have you seen that crook in his hand? You see it crossing the heart of Tutankhamun. All that stuff is Kemetic imagery. This isn't speculation, y'all. This is so when I saw that, I said, let me go see, because in the trailer, you see the black guy. Okay.
From Gangs of London.
The same guy, right? Who plays Bishop Adeyemi. He the Nigerian, but is he going to be a candidate for the Pope? Then you see the Latinos, which you have this surge of millions of Latinos. I said, what are they about to do here? I'm telling y'all, and I'm not going to give anything away. I'm just going to tell you this without saying anything about the plot. I would say that you will not be able to guess how this thing takes a turn. It's all about ambition. It's also about faith, and that's what made me think about it. And I would just mention this one line. They're caucusing. You know how they are. Once they get in the conclave, nobody can come out. So you see the little factions. You see the ones who want to be, the ones who don't want to be, the ones who are praying about it. So this one dude stands up and he says, you know, we have a lot of history. Today is not about history. The church is not about the history. The church is not about what we did yesterday. You see, you know what the church is? The church is what we do next. It's like, damn, I mean, the writing is, the right. And then he says this, and at one point, Finney says this, he says, there is certainty and there is doubt. He says, that's why we have a church, because, I'm certain that God exists. I'm certain there's a heaven, but if you're human, you're going to have doubt. He says the distance between certainty and doubt, that's where faith comes in. We're not certain that Kamala Harris is going to win this election. We got doubt, but guess what? How strong is your faith? And what are you going to do? Because faith without works is dead. This is the thing. And so the whole idea, I'm certain, I got some doubt. Well, what did you do? I have faith. Yeah, but did you get up off your knees when you pray? And this is where I want to end, because remember on Monday night, now then Sunday, I going to this place. Let me show you all right quick. I'm not going to talk a lot about it. This is called the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. If you were in office hours Monday night, you know. At this place here in Washington, D.C., everybody, if you're in D.C., please go see this, because there is a statue there that is was carved by our brother Ed Dwight. Yeah, that's right. The same Ed Dwight who was the first astronaut. The same Ed Dwight that went up and came down this summer that we talked about. Ed Dwight sculpting everywhere. The same Ed Dwight who carved that beautiful carving on the South Carolina State House grounds. He did this one. This is called Our Mother of Africa. It's Mary and Jesus. And the little boy, you can't hardly see here, the little boy is pointing. What is he pointing at? And this is the prayer card, because this is all they had in the bookstore. Our Mother of Africa. So, and of course, the irony is, of course, Our Mother of Africa, and then there's a crucifix by an East African brother, a wood sculpture on the other side by the altar. We lit these two candles right here because these two candles represent, they have every other little nook. They have our little candles you can buy and light the candles. In Our Mother of Africa, there are only two, but these were lit as of Sunday afternoon, because I'm not going to leave this place and then not be lit. But the boy Jesus, the baby Jesus in her arm, I wish you could see her face. It is such a beautiful, beautiful statue. And they got a little pillar here, a little, you know how you have the thing, you can get on your knees and pray, and you see people coming in and praying, mostly Black people. So the boy is pointing. And you walk in, you see him, you're like, my God, this is beautiful. And you see the boy on the back wall, Ed Dwight's carving, kind of like the one in South Carolina, that starts with the violence our people suffered in captivity. And then you see, as it's a bronze mural, 3D, because he carved it. They're coming out, they walking. Then you see them on the auction block. Then you see them, this is like Dan Black in The Coming. Then you see them busting their way out of the Civil War with guns. Then you see them coming through building community. Then you see them in the Civil Rights Movement. I am a man. Then you see the woman and man standing there and they looking toward the crucifix. Understand, if you are a Catholic, or if you're a person of faith in the Christian faith, or Muslim or Jew, if you're in the Abrahamic faith traditions, or if like me, ways of knowing to me is secondary to that spiritual feeling, there's no better place than that basilica, which is huge. Modeled on them ancient Egyptians, is no better place than Our Mother of Africa. And I might try to get over there between now and 2 just to say something to that Black woman and her baby. So anyway, that's
a reminder to everyone, the very first convert to Christianity was an African. I think we forget that. We've abdicated all of these faiths to people who have bastardized and twisted them into some form of hatred and otherism. But the foundation of all religion, first of all, you just pointed out, is Africa.
Yes.
And the first Christian, if we call them that, was in Queen Candace's court.
Come on.
So
Come on.
the most pure form of Christianity lives in Ethiopia to this day, which was never colonized or conquered, right?
That's
Ethiopia
right.
is one of the few places where Africans weren't infected.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And for the Muslims, y'all know Bilal, Muhammad, they say he's the founder. The first person coming to Islam was Bilal.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. And when Muhammad, in fact, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, Prophet Muhammad said, when I go to paradise, I'm gonna hear the footsteps of Bilal in front of me. That's what he said. I'm like, come on. I mean, our people. You know what I'm saying?
It's time to reclaim our time.
Yes.
Let's put this thing back on the right way. Put the axes back. I think that's what the world is waiting for us to claim our rightful position.
That's right. Harriet Ross Tubman, Araminta. It came to me. Minty. They called her Minty. Araminta. That was her icon name. Yeah. So anyway, before we
go, you interviewed Ananda Lewis this week and I missed it.
Yeah, it was she and Lamont worked together, so we aired. We were live, so it must have been Wednesday.
Okay, because I got to go for a walk and listen to that because I've been thinking about. We talked about her with Dr. Sunyata a few Wednesdays ago, Wellness Wednesday on my show because she is, it has spread the cancer.
This is the thing. She cleared it up.
Okay.
She said it's going back in the other direction now. Okay. That's why she said you know what's interesting. She said I'm disconnected from the social media and stuff. And so when I found out that they were saying that the thing, she's like, no, I gotta clear this up. So we talked to her probably half an hour.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
She walked through all that. But to the point she made, she said at this point, I'm on the regimen. I'm doing the homeopathic, but I'm also doing the kind of European Western style medicine. She said, but there were moments when I didn't have the money. Come on, y'all. This man get in. Do you know people's lives gonna be at risk? You know what I'm saying? She said I didn't have the money. And that's when she made the point. For cancer, something like that, time is of the essence. If you don't have the money to pay, you could do something, but don't because you can't pay. Oh man, it was very powerful, bro. Yeah.
And ladies and fellas, get your PSAs, fellas, ladies, get your mammographies. Shanice, the great singer Shanice, just revealed that she has breast cancer. Hadn't had a mammogram in 8 years. I think we avoid the thing, but like you said, time is everything. Catching things early, everything's treatable now. Just about.
Everything. Yeah, just about.
Catch it early. So let's be here to fight because we got work to do and we need y'all healthy.
Yes, including the United States of America. It's treatable.
It is treatable.
We got 3 days.
You know what? I forgot who likened our condition to cancer.
No question.
That is very cancerous. And we all have cancer cells. Do we how do, if we eat something or if it's genetic or whatever, how do we deal with it? You have people like, Angelina Jolie, who's like, it's in my genes. Let me cut it all out. Let me cut off my breast and get rid of everything because I don't want it. Like, how vigilant are we going to be to eradicate this thing that seems to be overcoming us? But we can fight it.
Oh, we can definitely fight it. We can fight it and win.
Yes.
Love you.
Right. Love you too.
Enjoy the walk. It's a beautiful day.
Oh my. So I don't know if I'm happy about it though. It's November.
Well, we should be terrified. Yes. Again, another reason to vote. Do you really want to take the risk?
And they said next week is going to be super cold. And it's about to shift. Like we're going to go from summer to winter in like 1 week.
How about
which is
that?
Probably also appropriate, but
definitely. So we'll see where we are this week, and everybody Monday night. If you got a subscription to Narrative and you're in Nubia, come on in. We're gonna really get into it on Monday night. So
cannot wait. Love you.
Love you too.
All right, love y'all. Talk to you.